All right, welcome once again to Social Distillation, the
Distillation.
submarine distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning directly onto your brain. I am Heath, that is Sam, and we are just going to randomly riff today because we were together over the weekend. Not together, but just like hanging out. It's
I
just,
mean, we're yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I'm not gay hug. Okay. Uh, anyway, so and we uh fished and didn't catch anything, which is how fishing
Hey,
usually works.
technically, I caught something.
Technically, you caught something, and technically, I caught some really big rocks.
Yeah,
It still hurts.
we caught a lot of those. I lost a lot of
Yeah.
tackle.
And so we're just going to kind of do a little of that today, and just kind of talk about some
Oh,
random things. And where I wanted to
hey, you
start,
faded out for a second.
yeah.
And it reminded me when I cut the recording last time, you were kind of distant,
Hmm,
echoey from your mic, so maybe a little closer today.
okay.
Yeah,
All right. I'm coming
because
through. Okay.
remember, one thing to those that have been watching the videos, we sound check with each other and everything sounds good, and then we get the recording to cut it and it sounds completely different than what we hear. So
Yeah.
we're figuring that part out. One of these days we'll get a 12-year-old that knows technology to help us out. Okay, now continue.
Careful, you're going to derail me because that makes me think of something else. But anyway,
Oh, we got another topic to talk about too. Speaking of 11-year-olds, actually my son,
yeah.
he's in fifth grade, which means they're going to have the sex talk this week.
Yay.
So we'll go into that at the end, I think.
Okay. All right. So where I wanted to start is actually somewhat related to that random tangent I almost went on. Um, on the car ride down, was talking to my wife who watches a lot of Korean dramas, and apparently wokeism has dangerously infected South Korea, which, as you pointed out, is bad considering who their neighbors are,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not going to go in on that and they're going to take advantage of it. But a cancel culture has gotten really stupid there, to the point that so like she was telling me about a drama that had shot like a dozen episodes, but after two it got canceled because people got outraged. The social media mob got outraged that there was too much Chinese product placement in it. There were a couple of historical inaccuracies, and they didn't like the fact that one of the characters is a famous Korean historical figure, and they didn't like the way that figure was portrayed, even though the concept of the show is this outlandish. It is a modern person whose consciousness, a modern man whose consciousness is somehow transported back into this Korean queen's body. That's a ridiculous concept to begin with, and you're complaining now that the fiction, the historical character who has now become a fictional character is not being portrayed properly. What is wrong with you people? And it dawned on me that it is we have become an incredibly selfish and self-centered society, and not just American society. Clearly it is stretching across. And I think I was listening to Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein, uh, the Jordan Peterson podcast from a few weeks ago, where he talked to Brett Weinstein, and they talked a lot about this, about how uh, uh, the your identity on the internet is consuming you, and it's is subsuming your identity in real life. And I think you see that, and that's why I think we're weirdly positioned, because we're of an age where we're kind of in between Gen X and Gen Y, and then obviously Gen Z. So we kind of have a leg in both. We kind of straddle the line of, we grew up without an online presence,
Mm-hmm.
but we were young enough when we did have an online presence, when that really started to get going in the late 90s, early
I
2000s.
think I think our school got internet our senior year.
Yeah. Our junior or senior year is when our school finally got internet, and it's not like it was great.
No, no, it was
Yeah.
AOL dial up.
Yeah.
And then we had the broadband sort of ish DSL. Was the original DSL at
When we went
Oklahoma
to
State?
college,
Yeah.
we had a fast Ethernet network on campus, and so that was, you know, light years ahead of where we came from.
Mhm.
But it was still fairly limited. There was still a lot of real life that you had to go out and do.
Well,
And more
I didn't have a
importantly,
cell phone until I was 25. I don't know when you got your first one.
uh, yeah, it was probably pretty close because it was early 20s. It was about that point where it became uh like the mid aughts, somewhere in there, it became more cost effective to just have a cell phone and not bother with a landline.
Hmm.
And so that's when we did it.
Yeah, I
But
remember first texting people, and it was when I went back to school. So I was mid
yeah,
20s and everybody was 18. And they were like, "Why do you keep yelling at me?" I was like, "What?" They're like, "Everything's all caps." I was like, "I don't know how to change it."
old man. Um, but what's important, because what Peterson and Weinstein really got into is that the reason it's probably so deleterious is because we had a chance to form our real life identity before that online identity started. The problem with younger generations now is there was never that separation. They have been online since they've been conscious, basically. And that creates an incredible arrogance and narcissism because with online with online socializing, you never actually really have to socialize because part of socializing is trade-offs. It's, you know, in a way, socializing is a mental fight. There's a give and take. You know, it's like if we're grappling, there's a give and take. And I may want to do this move, you know, uh, but you're doing something that requires I adjust. Okay.
I'm going to take that a step further. There's a there's a learned system of reading nuance.
Hmm.
You brought up the grappling. We both have some extensive wrestling background, and I did catch can wrestling and jujitsu for a long time, and MMA. And one of the things you develop in that sport that I think is just a good physical body skill, anyways, is a feel for not only your own body but what someone else's body is doing. And so you you don't. I used to close my eyes when we grapple because you take away that visual distraction that your brain has only limited capacity to think and to assimilate information. And so I took the visual distraction out as long as our bodies were connected. And and as long as our bodies were connected, I could feel when it was right to push or pull or move or shift or put my weight one direction or another. And we can do that psychologically too with somebody. You're reading their facial expressions. This is one of the more important points about masks with the kids, especially, is they're not learning to read facial expression. You can get some from the eyes, but the whole thing really plays together. And reading the nuance in someone's behavior is a social skill, and you can't do that online. I told you about a person online, social justice, ranting on me, but I think he had a really poor attempt at sarcasm. And sarcasm is hard online unless somebody knows you're a sarcastic person.
Right.
And realistically, this was on another person's thread that I do know, but I didn't know the person I was talking to. So I don't know his humor style. I don't know his sarcasm. I don't know what he's getting at from a nuance type standpoint. I just know the words he says. And we're being disconnected from that because we're not allowing physical contact even before COVID.
Yeah.
Everything was becoming online. Even learning is driven to be computer based. And social media just takes all of that and throws it out the window.
Well, that's a really good point, because when I read things, when I read posts from people that I know well, or even text messages or whatever, if I know them well, I read that not just in their voice, but in their cadence. So
Mhm,
it's as much like they're actually talking to me as it can be in the written form.
mhm.
I mean, I can't do that with someone I don't really know well. If I do that, what I'm doing is I'm projecting. So it's what I would be thinking and meaning if I wrote that, because I'm reading it in my own voice.
Mhm.
That's dangerous. But that's not where I was going with it. Because I think it was Weinstein made a really good point that online, not you know uh, the point about the push and pull is that you don't have to do that online, because you can just leave.
Well, you brought up ghosting. I think
Yeah,
it was the episode we don't have any video, episode 1.
yeah.
I think Heath brought up ghosting, and it's so easy now. Uh, and it's kind of a harmful to both parties if you really think about it. And it's and I hate to say that, because it's being sold as something that is good for the person who does the ghosting, but it really is harmful for both parties,
Oh,
because
I can't have
party
this drama in my life. I can't have this stress in my life.
yeah, I'm
We
just
need
cutting
stress
that
or we
person
don't
out, you
grow.
know. So it's harmful to the person who's ghosted because they have no closure.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there are situations where someone, you just got to cut them off because they're not going to go away quietly.
Mm.
We're those are the exception of the rule, but they exist, and those are the true sociopaths, narcissistic personalities. The people who just have to have the last word are going to be petty on the way out. That that exists. So we don't want to throw all the babies out with the bathwater, but at the same time, that's the exception to the rule. And what we're in a day and age where we live on the margins, so we're treating everybody like we should treat those people. And so anybody who does anything that seems to be a wrong to you is ghostable, and it's for your own mental health. But it's harmful to the person who's ghosted because they have no closure, but it's harmful to the ghoster because they learn no social skills.
Mm.
They become basically giant babies who just stop talking to you whenever they don't like something you say.
And this is where this mentality is so alien to me and hard to grasp, because like I said, we already had a foundation of our identity and our personality and all that in real life before we went online. So as an example, they were talking about something well, about identity that was much more, shall we say, controversial. So let me use a more benign example of one of our favorite authors is Robert Jordan, who wrote the Wheel of Time series, which
Mhm.
is has a ludicrously high word count, and and he is a little
14
mysterious.
books averaging about 1,000 pages each.
Yep.
In very small print.
And so since there's so much going on in this book, there's a very large online community that would talk about the, you know, the theories of what is going on, because there were so
Mhm.
many plot threads dangling through such a long series. Well, I was in a couple of different forums as the series was going on, and we would get into some rather heated debates. I didn't mind that, and sometimes I kind of liked that, to have that robust discussion. But if I had never, because real life forces you to do things. Okay, so if I'm uh, with you in real life, and I have to be with you because we're in the same class, we're on the same football team, whatever it happens to be, I have to figure out how to live and work with you, even though we disagree.
But
Well,
yeah, like when you were the quarterback and I was the center, if we hated each other, you still
yep,
had to stick your hand in my crotch.
yep, yep. Still had to get really closely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But um, but if I didn't have that foundation, if from the very beginning I was my avatar online, you know, some of those heated debates got annoying and stressful. And made me angry because why are you saying something so dumb? So I could have just left. I'm gonna go find a forum on this relatively, irrelevant topic where everyone or almost everyone agrees with me, or maybe I'll start my own and make sure that everybody agrees with me. I'm never going to grow intellectually or psychologically that way. I am always going to be a child.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're forming a bit of that now with all the cancellations on social
Exactly.
media, because you don't like what they say, just get rid of them.
And this is where that train of thought came from. It was one cancel culture, but it was another um, that it kind of occurred to me that cancel culture has become a relatively new idea, but I think it's had its genesis a long time ago in relative social media terms. Because now what cancel culture is it's a mob that gets together online. That's why we talked about mob psychology. It's a mob that gets together online that says we're going to shut this thing that we don't like down. Well, that's been around for a little while on an individual level, because how many times do you see someone post something and then people disagree with them, and then the poster gets all offended of, I didn't post this so you could disagree with me. I don't care if you disagree with it. And now you see it, people will preemptively do that with starting out a controversial post with, I don't want to see any replies and I don't care if you disagree with me, and then go off on a rant of something
Or I saw one
controversial.
the other day, is if you don't, or if you think this thought, I'm not going to say what the exact thought was, but it had to do with COVID. If you think this thought, then you're a horrible person and you can just unfriend me now. And I was just like, that's kind of what cults do, but
Exactly. And a lot of times the justification from the people with this mentality is that, well, I'm being attacked when someone
mm,
disagrees with me. I'm being attacked. Well, wait a minute. Again, supreme selfishness and arrogance, because you cannot or will not acknowledge that this started because you attacked people. But see,
mhm.
they don't see it that way because they're right. How can it be an attack for me to say, if you believe this, you're a terrible person when I'm right? And
Well,
so
we
when I
we
raise
talked
my,
about this in our
yeah,
critical race discussion.
yeah,
We're being trained to justify attacks from one direction, and it happens in social media as well.
exactly. And the danger there is manyfold. It's we're segregating ourselves into smaller and smaller groups so that we're only in bubbles that never offend us, which means we're never challenged, which means our intellectual and psychological growth stagnates. The other problem with it is that we because these bubbles are becoming more and more rigid, we then start othering anyone who's not in our bubble.
Yeah, I got a meme for this, so give me a second. You fill in the time for a second. Hold on.
Well, to kind of finish my thought there is, this is one of the places where I started to pull back from my ranting and arguing on Facebook, and really I stopped trying to just convince someone of my side, and just started trying to point out, hey, there is another side and they're not terrible people. You know, when you post something that
I think maybe the problem is we've got so many kids in soccer at a very young age
clearly
that
communists.
they're taught to be rewarded by faking injury. That it's a random thought, but
No, I mean it's part and parcel with it. Problems this complicated don't come from simple points. You might be able to trace the main point back to one thing, but there are a lot of things that go with it. It's one of the things that, like, in the historical side,
yeah,
drives me
it's not a
crazy.
causation, but it's a nice caricature of what is going on, because we are being rewarded by yelling and screaming and grabbing
Mhm,
our ankle
mhm.
for a slight infraction, where we can really survive the 200-mile-an-hour crash.
And instinctually we learn from those, even if it's a bad lesson,
Mhm.
because we we crave physically and psychologically, we crave that positive reinforcement. So if we learn that doing this bad thing is good for us, we're going to keep doing that bad thing.
Mhm. Whereas in the other situation, you learn that doing the wrong thing almost killed you
Yeah.
for real. It almost seriously injured you for real,
Mhm.
or maybe it did injure you. Uh, I guess I could tell the Grand Canyon story
Yeah.
with Ben. So my son, we were at the Grand Canyon. This is my take on the Grand Canyon. Don't take small kids. I know it will mess with the scenery and stuff to put a rail around the whole rim. Uh, I think they should anyways, because what's on the other side is death. And we did a research before, and about 4 people fall every year. About 17 people die, but most of it's heat exhaustion. After being there with my small kids and all the other kids around, I'm amazed it's only 4. I'm amazed it's not 4 a day, because I caught somebody else's kid from stumbling off the cliff, because they did the 4-year-old look at your feet while you walk, and was walking right towards the edge, and just mom didn't really do anything wrong. She looked at her phone for a second and the kid stumbled off. It was that quick. It was really lightning fast. But I grabbed the kid by the back of her shirt and yanked her back onto the trail. And luckily, mom didn't hate me for it. She thanked me, and was kind of embarrassed, but really she didn't do anything wrong. She just looked at her phone because someone called, and then put her phone right back in her pocket. And in that time, the kid had gone behind her and started stumbling off. And about 5 minutes later, my son, who was doing really well, he's 11, he was paying attention. He wanted to pet a dog. And so he starts doing kind of a backwards walking sideways thing. And I caught him about yay far from the edge before he went off. And I made him turn around and look and go. And he was useless the rest of the day. Me too, kind of ish. I wanted to just get back to the RV and make the palpitations go away and everything. But he was useless, and I brought it up, and he said, "Well, let's just not talk about that, Dad. I don't want to talk about that." And I was like, "Well, we need to.
Oh, yeah.
We need to, because it's a life lesson. It's a life lesson that almost cost you your life. And if you're gonna go through that situation, you might as well learn every single thing you can
Right.
from it, because
And,
it already happened."
and that's kind of what you were talking about when you sort of flippantly said that it's we get too many kids playing soccer and they're being rewarded for this garbage. But it's so much more than that, right? It's I don't remember who I first heard use this term. Maybe it was Peterson. Rough play. We don't do that anymore,
Mm-mm.
right? So part of rough play is social. It's learning to socialize. It's you know, we were play wrestling and then it turned into real wrestling and then we started punching each other. Okay, well then
Which was the
we
life lesson. What do we do to make it turn into real wrestling?
yes, and
You
so
know,
we
who
we've
who
got
went
to
too
learn
far and
from that.
when? Yeah.
But then there's also a physical side to that of from a very young age we uh we fought with each other as kids, or we scraped the hell out of our hands and knees climbing up trees or falling off our bikes or whatever, you know. Yeah, how many ways did we hurt ourselves as a kid? And when you're a kid you think you're gonna die, but that's actually good because then you learn. you
Mm-hmm.
you you learn you learn in a semi-controlled way that life can be very dangerous and you need to be aware of that.
Well, I talk about it a lot with my clients. I know I've talked about it with you. I don't think I've mentioned it on this yet. What are we on, number 9? I think this is 9 or 10.
Oh,
I think it's 9. But we forget, because we live in our walled houses with our Uber Eats and our conveniences and Netflix, that realistically, we live in a world where nature is constantly trying to kill us. And I think the disconnect from that understanding is part of everybody's overreaction to COVID, because it added to the list
Mhm.
realistically. But yeah, we live in a world that's constantly trying to kill us. In that situation, it was a 700-foot drop off a cliff. COVID is another illness that's out there. Uh, if we didn't have running water, if someone had just started drinking water after the big freeze when all the pipes were busted, they might have got dysentery and died, which was something that happened all the time. So we live in a world that's constantly trying to kill us, and survival of the fittest isn't just an evolutionary thing. It's adapted through nurture as well. You learn things along the way, and human beings especially, because we have a thing called the prefrontal cortex, which actually assimilates that information and helps you make better decisions instead of reactionary decisions that hurt you in the past. You make a reactionary decision that hurts you, and then you get the feedback that from your prefrontal cortex that rewires your reactionary center to not hurt you later. But did we exhaust that subject?
I think so. I mean, I'm old and forgetful, so I can't even remember what I was using the rant on selfishness to set you up for. Was it that?
Nope, it wasn't that, but we went there.
Okay.
uh I believe it was you wanted me to talk about the show I was watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because you kind of you started going towards the expecting people to think the way I think,
Yeah.
and then you went off on a tangent. But so I started watching a show called Handmaid's Tale. And if you've watched it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I actually think it's really worth a watch. So it's really well done. I'm only 2 episodes in.
Let me raise my hand there real quick, because any right-leaning person who hears you say that is going to be horrified, because it's got such a bad reputation. And I think from what I've heard, deservedly so. That being said,
That being said, it's well, yeah, if you take things at face value, and I think this is the right's problem in a lot of ways, is they look at the surface way too much. And it is, so this is what the right would have a problem with. It really is harsh on what we would call, I mean, it's a caricature of the patriarchy and the religious, we'll say the religious right, but just Puritanesque Christianity. We're talking like go back to the Salem witch trials type Christianity. And if you just look at those things, I can see why any right-leaning person would be like, oh, it's just another woke talking point or whatever. But it's deeper than that, and it's really well done and very watchable, even if
from an
you understand
artistic
it
standpoint of
from an
view.
artistic standpoint. And so what I've been talking to, and I live, even though I'm a little bit more lefty minded, I live in a very, very conservative area. And so most of the people I deal with every day are very conservative. And some of them like the show and they wanted to talk to me about it because of my political leanings and insights. And they're talking about how everything that's happening in the show is what the left is doing. And so we get into that discussion, is this confession through projection? Are they projecting what they're doing basically to hide in plain sight, kind of thing? And it's similar, but it's completely different. And I've spent a lot of time on both sides of the aisle, and I got 1 foot in each, on each side of the right and left, realistically. And the brain patterns on both sides are completely different in how they view things and what they would do with certain privileges or powers or whatever. And the left, and this is where my take gets a little different, is it's not just a confession, it's the fact that the left, the far left at least, I would say the ones that are completely dissonant, really believe that would be the world if the religious right took complete
Mhm.
power. And so they, in their own mind, that is an internal justification for an extreme in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And it goes kind of along the lines of the original Frankfurt School being a counter to the Nazi regime. It ended up just looking in a mirror, because it ended up being the exact opposite, which was a mirror image of what they thought they were fighting. And so I think that's more the issue. They cannot fathom that the right wouldn't create this world that they're portraying in the show.
Well, in part because they think, and I don't mean this, I'm not exaggerating here. I have encountered this. They think that that's how those people are now. They just don't have the power.
Mhm.
And one of my
And
earliest, hey,
remember,
wait a minute.
postmodernism, power means everything.
And so one of
Yeah.
my first hold on, wait a minute moments was with someone who I'd spent a lot of time with as a friend, and she was much more left than I was. And I mean, basically a single issue voter on abortion. And from everything I've seen, Handmaid's Tale is a not even remotely veiled allegory to abortion rights. And the,
It goes further. It is about
mhm,
the main thing is the handmaids are there for procreating,
right.
because people can't make babies
But again,
like they
because
should. Yeah.
that's how the radical left thinks of the religious right in the context of abortion, is
There's
that
an environmentalist part to it
right?
as well too.
But the right wants to get rid of abortion because they want to make sure that women can't do anything but be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. They
Mhm.
really believe that. I could not get this person to believe that, hey, wait a minute, you haven't the foggiest idea what people on the right think. You haven't the foggiest idea uh what the stance is by these people on abortion. And she just refused to believe me, no matter how often I said, who have you actually read? Who have you actually listened to
Mhm.
that you're sure this is what the right thinks? And part of it is something I kind of disagree with you on, but kind of don't, which is ascribing motive. So you're really concerned about the, well, everybody's just trying to do their best, because when it comes to the radical critical theory, postmodernism, regressive left, it's pretty clear there are a lot of people who don't have good intentions.
Mhm. Well,
But I hesitate to ascribe motive to someone, because I think that's a dangerous step to othering, because I don't have to engage with them if they're a Nazi. I have to storm the beaches of Omaha, right?
well, let me clarify and see if you still disagree with me, because I believe most of the people doing the fighting have good motives.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's my point with this whole little part of the segment was if you I encourage conservatives to watch Handmaid's Tale, because that's what that person sees in you when they're talking their point. And maybe part of the solution on from that side is showing you're not that monster.
Mhm.
And that the majority of, I mean, there are those monsters out there. There are probably people who would want that to happen, but they're very fringe, very, very fringe on the right. And showing that the majority of people is like, this is not the direction we want to go. This is a caricature at most friendly of where we want to go. But at the same time, it's not even close to where we want to go. So maybe the first step is showing we're not that monster, on the, and I said we there because anybody who's not extremely far left right now is considered in that camp, even though I'm not religious at all.
Well, and like we said in one of our first or second episode, is how many times have you been called a Trumper just for saying
Mhm.
he's not that bad?
Yeah, exactly. Or no, I didn't even say that. I didn't even use a subjective term
Mhm.
like he's not that bad. I said he's an American and he is entitled to his rights in the court of law. That's what I said, and I was apparently the biggest Trumper in the world after saying that. So just that he was entitled his right to representation and all that stuff. So, but I do encourage. But let me clarify the point on the bad people. The majority of the people on the ground, they're not bad people. They're just so stricken with that cognitive dissonance that they believe they're fighting the good fight. That's my point, is the very bad people are fewer, but they're making that happen because you create these things through indoctrination and this cultish personality. So you make good people do bad things. So the majority of people, the soldiers on the ground in every war, you look at what happened in with the German and British soldiers in the Christmas thing, right? They got together, they exchanged phone numbers, they played soccer, they everything in the Christmas truce. They realized, oh, they're not bad people. Neither side was bad people. They were the soldiers.
And then to put an exclamation point on your point there is that the reason that only happened once is because then after that, the high level generals sent out strict directives that this will never happen again, and officers are duty bound that if somebody tries it, you are to shoot them.
Mm-hmm. But the flip side, and this is where I think I became misunderstood, is you do see these strings being pulled, and they are being pulled by very bad people who just want power. And when you start understanding that and understanding how these strings work, not exactly. not just that some people are going to use it for power, is you can start following the string to where it ends. And who's the puppet masters here? So no, the regular people on the ground, the person you argue with online, your buddy, they're fighting a war based on the psychological manipulation from the top down.
Not that doesn't let you off the hook if you're one of these foot soldiers.
No, and
right?
And it doesn't let you off the hook, especially in a situation like this where we're not in trenches across a battlefield aiming a gun at each other. We're in a situation where you can walk that golden bridge to friendship again at any time. You may take some flack from the people you've been rah-rahing with, but now it's your job to help them see that. And once you've seen the truth and you've been exposed to the truth and you continue on, then you actually start to become what you say you're fighting. So if you've been exposed to the truth and you've seen it, you stop over. There is I don't know where the line is, but at some point there is a moment where you have to be held responsible.
And I think for me, that is, and where I kind of tend to wash my hands with someone is if after repeated attempts, they even refuse. You don't have to agree with me, but for crying out loud, if you repeatedly even refuse to look at and acknowledge that I have an argument, you refuse to look at any sources I cite, you refuse to engage with me on the argument, I say
that's a touchy one too, because the powers that be are creating that refusal too.
Exactly. And that's why we talked about mob psychology from the beginning, is you have to be aware that you are being manipulated. And I think an important point about this, the higher ups, the people pulling the strings are the bad actors, is you mentioned this over the weekend that you very rarely get someone come to power who isn't a sketchy character, if not an outright bad character, because what you have to do to climb the ranks of power, you're probably a narcissist. I mean, no, you're a narcissist to some degree.
Usually sociopathic.
Yeah. So she,
Narcissism involves a lot of positive emotion towards yourself. So they tend to not be in the same bubble. And I personally think Trump is a great example of a narcissist that was in power. And what we see with him is he skipped the system. He jumped right to the top because he had that influence with money and already existing cultural power.
celebrity, yeah.
Yeah. So he jumped right in the deep end and started, you know, dunking kids, whereas the people like our current commander in chief, I don't know what naming him does anymore on this channel, but uh he's been in the system the whole time, and he's had to work the game the
So far
whole
as I know,
time.
he's never held a non-governmental job.
Well, same with Bernie Sanders. He's never
Mm-hmm.
had a non-governmental job. Someone like Mitch Mcconnell, how long has he been in government? Or who's another old guy in there, or old
Well, I'll
gal?
even throw someone in the right on
Pelosi.
there because you
Oh,
get
I
this
said
on the
Mitch
right too.
Mcconnell.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mitch McConnell is definitely a swamp beast, but even someone I
Mm.
like Ted Cruz, I worry what are you going to become because I'm pretty sure he started his lawyer career uh in a district attorney's office or something to that effect. So even before he was a politician, he was a political lawyer.
Ted
So he's
Cruz
always
isn't.
been in the system.
This is I think a place where people lump me in the right,
Mhm.
because Ted, but I guess I got to clarify on him. Ted Cruz is way too conservative for me,
Mhm.
from his political stand, his where he stands. But he intrigues me because he adapts. He got blasted and defeated by Trump because of uh, Trump's ability to manipulate the journalism and the social media and the cultural level stuff. And what did he do since then? He started hanging out with the Daily Wire guys, the Blaze guys, doing podcasts, getting entrenched in that media lifestyle. And then when this border stuff happens, he goes Vice style media and goes down there and actually does better journalism than any of the journalists around that situation. So he learned and he adapted. I still don't like a lot of his uh, fiscal stuff. Anything that I think a lot of his extreme fiscal stuff would be negated by just politics. But yeah, he just his stance on a lot of things. He's way too conservative for my comfort. But at the same time, he intrigues me because as a person, he has adapted to
Yeah.
situations and
Well,
and modernized himself.
and I think an important point that I just thought of is along the lines of what we're talking about here is yeah, he's more conservative than you would like politically. But given the likely alternatives, I would bet you would vote for him for president in the next election.
Versus
Same,
Kamala or Biden.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
because you know that he has at least got some principles and some morals,
Mm.
right? Well, same with me and the good looking lady you like, Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh yeah.
She's way too left for me in her policies, but you know what? She is a person of principle, and
Mm-hmm.
and if somehow she switched parties or there was a third party or whatever, and she became one of the leading candidates, I'd vote for her because at this point where we're at right now as a country, uh, I really think policy matters a lot less than um, than principle and uh, and our ability to unite under broad ideas.
Well,
Because
here's where having a foot in both sides kind of comes as an advantage, and actually having an understanding of the brain makeup of both sides. Because we talked about Handmaid's Tale, and that's the vision from the left of what the right would do if they had power. And this is why, if there's a real controversial uh, presidential campaign on both sides, and ended up being Ted Cruz against, say, Biden or Harris or some other, or Pelosi or some other person of that extreme makeup, or even old school establishment makeup, is I could pick someone like Cruz with a good conscience, not because I agree with his policies, but I understand the conservative mind, and he wouldn't make a blitz to change everything to his way of thinking. He would want things to go through that were more conservative, but he wouldn't do this blitzkrieg of policy and executive orders and stuff like that. Trump did that to some degree, but Trump's not a conservative. He's a bullish businessman. And so the real conservative mind would say, okay, I want these things to go this way, but let's slowly work towards it and build a structure around it, and all of that. So I know something crazy isn't going to happen unless we elect an actual fringe right winger. And so as long as you avoid that, it's a lot of times the better option than the volatile, controversial left candidate. Now, if there's a solid left candidate, like I said, Tulsi Gabbard, someone who is patriotic and who is a person of the people and wants to know what the people want and wants to compromise and see how we can work together as a country, oh, this is a no-brainer for me. But we didn't have that this time around.
And this is a good illustration of how the people pulling the strings, you have to be incredibly skeptical of them, because they have no intellectual or moral authority to stand on here. As an example, Bill Maher, who I think it was right before the election, basically said, and he said it as a, jokingly, because he's supposedly a comedian, that, hey, I know we said this about Romney, but we mean it this time. Trump's bad. Trump's a really bad guy. He's going to do really bad things. Hold on. Wait a minute. You said just as much vitriolic, ad hominem, hate-filled, character destructive things about Mitt freaking Romney, the most milquetoast man in politics. At the time, he was every bit as horrible as Trump was. When Trump came along, you tried to convince us that he was an aberration in how terrible he was. But some of us remember you said the exact same freaking things about Mitt freaking Romney. You have no moral or intellectual authority here.
So that's a kind of a cry wolf scenario.
Yeah.
And I'd admit that's kind of the time of politics where I was head down in career. And as long as someone didn't, shut my business down or anything like that, I didn't really pay attention. But then looking back, it is kind of, at least your evaluation of Mitt Romney, it's kind of like that. Bill Maher, I think one of the biggest benefits of this woke breaking point movement is he became funny again, because he just makes fun of everybody now. And so he can be funny. My critique on him is pretty much my critique on Sam Harris, is he treats everybody like they're stupid if they don't think like he does. And maybe that's his, I don't know if he really thinks that way, but it's definitely his comedy shtick. Whereas I think Harris kind of does think that way. But
well, to me, though, there's a distinct difference between an academic intellectual like Harris, who's convinced he's right and trying to demonstrate and persuade on an intellectual or scientific point, versus Maurer, who, yeah, technically he's a comedian, but he's also trying to persuade people to his political point of view. Mm-hmm. So when you treat people like that, when you act with such certainty on things that are inherently pretty subjective, makes you a dick.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think it and in a lot of ways it negates what you're trying to say. Even if you agree with what he has to say, he's the type of person we should really go find someone else saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the left strategies that really it kind of rings with it creates a lot of the dissonance is, and this is where educated versus smart people come into it, is a lot of very educated people vote left just because they don't want to they don't want the stigma of being the deplorable, the dumb redneck righty, or it's almost, they've created in that duopoly, if you're smart, you're going to go this way, and they don't want that stigma of not being the smart kid, and I think that sounds stupid. Well, okay, it is stupid, but any character trait that you're very proud of in yourself is going to be your weak point. And what we do know about dissonance studies is the smarter you are, the better you are at justifying your blind spot. Oh, Ben. Okay, that's my son, Ben, everybody. I guess I got to click the button, do kids show up in your video, this,
Well,
whatever YouTube, but I think it does specifically say if there's anything illegal or whatever,
yeah.
which we're not doing. So,
But
and nobody watches us anyway. So
what you were just saying there fits right in with what you were talking about before we started recording, of that, people are pointing out the contradiction in The Handmaid's Tale, that, well, wait a minute, you're criticizing the religious right for being authoritarian and evil, but what they're doing in the show is exactly what the left is doing right now to shut people down and destroy people if they fall out of line. But as you said, would they care?
but that's where the dissonance comes in. It's justified because it prevents the other thing.
Well, yeah, they're evil for being authoritarian because they're wrong, but we're righteous for being authoritarian because we're on the side of the angels.
Well, and even take that a step further, all the people that are just riding the tide that really don't want that authoritarian left, it's better than in their mind than the authoritarian right, and they think they can handle it when that time comes, which they can't because they've given it all this power. And that's how authoritarian regimes come to power, is they convince you that they're not, or they just take advantage of a big opening like Napoleon did after the French Revolution. But trying to decide where I wanted to go with that. Very smart people.
Radically shift gears for all I care. Very smart people, and you mentioned Napoleon as someone who took advantage of the chaos, but also be wary of people who create the chaos. But by their own admission, that's what the Bolshevik Revolution was about. That's Lenin said explicitly that they knew they did not have a majority. They could not take the country. They were trying to create such a chaotic situation that a small group could seize power.
Oh, we went over this in the CRT discussion. The strategy used to be to take advantage of anything that went wrong. But when less and less things went wrong, they had to create things that are wrong, which is why I fight that ideology so hard. It was the conclusion that not the direction my research during the quarantine went after seeing all the numbers was the pattern suggested that the ideology itself was creating the problem. Where it would be a fringe thing that we could identify easily and figure out how to put checks and balances on it, it became a mainstream thing because realistically, the people who are pulling the strings, those few behind the scenes, do you want me to name a few of them where the strings go to? We talked about Angela Davis. I'm going to put her on there. Angela Davis and her good friendship with Jim Jones, if that tells anybody anything.
I hope it does. Well, who's I'm drawing a blank on the head of. So I think we've touched on this, but people need to realize there is a difference between BLM the idea and BLM Inc., which is an actual thing.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on most of its colors. Angela Davis has been brought in, but she wasn't one of the original founders. And there was two other women that are the head of BLM, and they're not race activists per se. They're Black trans activists.
They're
So
also self-avowed radical Marxists. It
yeah, yeah.
not necessarily in philosophy,
No,
but
they're trained in radical Marxism.
yes,
Is the
as a
direct quote?
technique,
Yeah, as a direct quote.
right? And I, before I got off of Facebook, I said this to someone, and haha, you're a conspiracy theorist kook, and I'm like, here's the video of her saying it. Didn't change anyone's mind because
No,
that's
yes,
the way things work now.
again, it's the dissonance. Uh, it doesn't matter that they're on video saying it. Oh, it must have been clipped, or it must have been this or that. You see it from the right, you know. Oh,
and I'm confident that the people who do this don't bother to actually watch the video. They just say, "Up, it's taken out of context."
Yeah, if it's a quick clip, they'll watch it. But if it's a full video of something or a 2-hour podcast, this slight tangent. This is what bothered me. I was listening to these podcasts and I was like, oh, there's a lot of good information people get. They can get their news from these things because you just, listen to the experts. Well, you got someone interviewing an expert for 2 hours, something like that. And it's not short form. It's not 5 words and then someone talking over you, like you see on all the major news networks, whether it's conservative or I can't even say liberal anymore, progressive media is 5 words and then everybody talking over each other versus an actual sit down discussion like we're having. And then I saw a study on how much time people spend watching the news. And the average American spends 2 to 3 hours a day watching the news. So that excuse went out the window. They're watching a 30-minute clip that's replayed for 2 or 3 hours versus new information for 2 or 3 hours. So the boredom excuse in my mind went out the window. Quit getting brainwashed by repeated information. Listen to full conversation.
It's so annoying when you've unplugged from the news and then you go to like a gym or you're stuck in an airport, someplace where they leave the news on and you are reminded how little actual news there is and how much they just recycle the same thing. Heck, just take the news out of it to make it not political. Watch ESPN. I mean, because they're so political, but when I used to like leave ESPN on in the background and their entire afternoon lineup was talking about the same handful of shows over and over and over again. Or the same handful of topics on all of these shows. And eventually I just got bored with it. That's the main reason I stopped watching.
Yeah, it's like I already know who won that game and why and who took the last shot. But yeah, that was only 30 minutes ago. Maybe someone new is watching.
Yep.
Or maybe we can keep repeating the same information so you regurgitate it without thinking. But the strings, where were we going with the strings? Who's pulling the strings?
I didn't know if how deep you wanted to get in on that of who's pulling the strings and why. Because I feel like that's more of a look. I mean, this isn't just wild conspiracy speculation. That's kind of a thing we need a full episode on with sources and stuff if we're going to get deep into that, because I think it does matter and you need to know. People need to know so that they can connect these dots and know who you need to be suspicious of.
Well, realistically, everybody.
I mean, like we were just saying, realistically, everyone in a position of power. Well, if for no other reason, because they have power and power corrupts.
Let me give I hate set in stone rules, but let me just kind of put one that might be a good guideline, a good rubric. If their information ultimately is divisive for political gain, there's a string puller right there. If it others other people, if it straw mans the opposition to their point, or if it tries to convince you to not even entertain the information from the other side. Those are some pretty good red flags to go by, I would think. Anything you want to add to that list?
Well, it just reminded me of something uh Peterson and Weinstein were talking about that so I don't remember who started the conversation. We got on the subject of the attacks against the both of them from the regressive radical left, and how over the top they were and how they didn't stop. And one of them made the point that, I think it was Peterson, that, well, of course, because what you have to do, and it's not going to stop, it's only going to get worse, because what they're trying to do is to paint those who disagree with them in such negative terms that no one would even think to check that person out. So a good example of this is Rudy Giuliani. Not that long ago, Rudy Giuliani was America's mayor. He's the man who brought down the mob. He was the mayor who instilled calm and resolve during 9/11 in New York City. Now all of a sudden, because he's Trump's lawyer, he's a lunatic who should be disbarred, and is spouting conspiracy theories. And one of the things that drove me crazy, because I'm listening to mostly right sources, is that during the post-election mumbo jumbo, people kept repeatedly saying that he's making claims and not presenting evidence. Have you actually listened to him? Have you actually watched him? Do you not realize that he just spent 3.5 hours making a presentation to a state legislature? But again, if all you hear over and over and over again is that he's a lunatic making wild accusation and losing it on news shows, you're not even going to bother, because why would you?
Mm-hmm. Well, this situation wasn't helped because Sidney Powell actually was, and Linwood actually were conspiracy theorists. So he was, Giuliani is a good lawyer. Obviously, his track record supports that. But these other two were out of their realm. First of all, they were different kinds of lawyers, and they really, Linwood specifically, really went down the QAnon rabbit hole.
Yeah, but see, he's a sketchy character, and I don't
Mhm.
know that he didn't do that on purpose, because he's a lifetime Democrat and Democrat donor. I don't know that he wasn't doing that on purpose to create chaos.
Who knows?
Who
Who knows on
knows?
that one? That one's going to take some assumption and speculation based on his past. But what he was doing in the moment that we can speak on as fact was
But
running down
the point is, there were other people muddying the waters, and that
yeah.
was used to blanket label everyone
Mm-hmm.
that was even tacitly in agreement with those people. Up, they're all nuts. Now hold on a second. Go and see for yourself. Okay, yeah, those people may be nuts. All right. So I've listened to that guy. Yep. Yeah, he's nuts. Okay, but I know this guy has a decent reputation. Well, I guess he's crazy now too. No, go spend some time looking.
We need to get back to, I know where we were going with the string pullers. We need to get back to making bad things happen so that to self-fulfill prophecy, baby, basically. Uh, it's part of the activist strategy now. It really is. We went over Kaepernick. Do something that pisses a lot of people off, and take that fact that they get pissed, or attach cause to it after the fact, and then take the fact that they got pissed off as evidence that X exists. Well, we really do have to consider that strategy, because it's being employed often on with a lot of things going on.
Well, a good example of that, because you brought up Kaepernick, was his pro day. It was after all of his social media complaining and all of the controversy and nonsense. the NFL set up basically a pro day just for him with a representative from every team. It was completely unprecedented. It had never happened before. They said, okay, here's your chance. You said you were treated unfairly. Here's your chance. And then he threw a fit and started uh, complaining about it and started making excuses and nitpicking and saying, okay, well, you bent over backwards and did this unprecedented thing, but you haven't done enough and you need to do these things. And I believe he didn't show up the first time, and then they rescheduled it, and then he showed up late, and it was a mess. It just, to me, it demonstrated clearly that this isn't about what he says it's about.
Yeah. I'm going to try to paint a picture and you help me be clear about it. It has to do, we recently, one of the, so we've got mimetic propagators online, and I know what people are going to post before they post it now. And if I know what you're going to post before you post it now, you have left the general intelligence of humanity. You really have. Now, this one's a little late because this happened about a month ago, where the Orwell talk was real big for a long time, because we're basically repeating everything that happens in the book 1984. And it was a kind of a tweet screenshot that's been making its rounds, that he wasn't predicting the future. He was commenting on things that were happening at the time where he was. So we don't need to take that seriously. Basically, it was a lot of people are taking it seriously because we are repeating the artwork that is the book 1984. And that it's correct. He wasn't trying to prophesy. That's a correct statement, most likely. But at the same time, that actually, to me, adds weight to why we needed to take it more seriously, because he was making a caricature, which is, if anybody's had a caricature drawing done, you take things about that person and you amplify them to make a funny picture. And he was amplifying social things happening at the time to say, this is what could happen if this was to be what was the norm. And this is how it would happen. So we take that a step further. So we can still learn from that because it's happening.
Yes.
And what he was he was a polymath of his age. He was a person who could observe trends and make a big picture out of it. And he did, and he wrote a book.
He was also someone who wasn't afraid to take life experience and new data and change his mind. I mean,
he was also in it, because exactly, he was speaking of a socialist takeover when he was a lifelong socialist.
Yeah,
activist.
He fought in Spain. A lot of people don't know that he fought in Spain, and he saw things because he was one of these wide-eyed utopians who thought that we are going to change the world and it's going to be great. And then he went into Spain and he saw incredible horrors committed by his own side, and he had enough intellectual and moral strength to recognize, I don't care if what we're doing is the right thing, that's wrong. You cannot do that to people.
And fast forward to this day and age, we have liberal, what he calls himself, prophetic satirist in Gad Saad. Again, prophetic satire. So he makes satire which caricatures something that is happening, and in the last 2 years they keep coming true. And on the right end, you get the Babylon Bee. Some of their ridiculous headlines are news today. So yeah, we do need to take these people seriously, because they're very good at analyzing people and society and systems. So when we work in systems, everything has patterns. And I'm going to paint a picture here, and I'm going to create a pattern that I hope doesn't happen. But if it does, we're on video documenting this. Okay. So we've already gone over the population data on the reversal of the positive trends in crime data and incarceration data. We could have put drug data in there as well. In this kind of long running 10-year narrative of the greatest threat to the US is white supremacy. And we've also got an academic movement that became a corporate movement that has become a media movement in identifying everyone who is not, in Nicole Hannah-Jones' words, politically black. I think someone said it before her. May have been not Crenshaw. It was around that era though. But politically black, which means someone like Shelby Steele is not politically black. He's a person who happens to be black.
Yes, despite that, for those of you who don't know, he is old enough that he grew up in segregation and experienced racism, like real racism, not what we call racism now, experienced real racism and bigotry as a child. He grew up in that.
And for all of us lighter toned people, when you bring up the you get really harangued if you bring up I have friends that are black that agree with, or that they actually agree with my assessment of what's going on. They're not black either because they're not politically black. So we have this narrative being strung out for a long time, which ultimately, if you're not politically black, by the critical theory dogma, you are a white supremacist. And if you are black and you are not politically black, you are a multicultural white supremacist. There is a term for it now. It is even in the USA Today publications. But
that's how you could be a Jew like Ben Shapiro and be a white supremacist, or be a black man who grew up in Harlem like Thomas Sowell and you're a white supremacist.
So now this ever expanding term that is white supremacist. So we kind of touched on all of that. So you can be, unless you are as woke as can be when it comes to race, you're a white supremacist. It doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter your background, anything. Doesn't matter if you actually even are racist or not. You are, because you're not anti-racist. So so they've created this other that is a white supremacist, which is a bad name because real white supremacists are bad people. And all of us can agree with that. Even most white supremacists know they're bad. They just don't care.
Yes, because their tribe matters more.
Exactly. So we've got this people who are othered. And now what we've seen, and it was in the works before, but we've really seen it since January 6th, is the coupling of white supremacist and domestic terrorist. And they're trying to push, not pushing through yet, but it's being brought in. And I think it's probably part of Biden's restructuring everything that he wants to do after his secret meeting.
Yeah.
But the coupling, it's a domestic terror bill. So basically Patriot Act 10.0 on monitoring and being able to go after people for quote unquote suspicion of domestic terrorism.
This one goes up to 11.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I need you to interject the humor because I'm too serious right now. But so I'm putting together all these things that have been working for so long, and the patterns are forming a puzzle. But we've got white supremacy being almost everybody who's not of a certain political leaning. We've got domestic terrorism being associated with white supremacy and only white supremacy. And now our military is going through trainings that are all based on critical theories. And Heath grew up in a military family. I grew up in a military family, even though I wasn't allowed to be accepted into it. But we have, for the most part, a group of 18 to 25-year-olds with partially developed frontal lobes, with some degree of PTSD, for the most part, being taught that white supremacists are domestic terrorists and these are the white supremacists. So we're having a military trained to fight us. And that worries me.
I was, I like I've said repeatedly, I'm pessimistic and cynical that we're going to turn things around, but I still didn't expect to immediately jump straight into 1984, because I've long said to people both on the left and the right, look, calm down. It can never be that bad. We can never get to the extreme case on either side because the military won't let it happen. Because if you grow up in the military, and as I get older and marginally less dumb, I regret not going into it, if for no other reason than so my children would be raised knowing the mentality and the ethos of people in the military, or what that was when I was growing up. Because the sense of honor and duty and camaraderie is pretty indescribable. I mean, you can kind of uh, uh, show it in something like Band of Brothers, but you don't understand how that permeates every level, or permeated, unfortunately, maybe I should say, permeated every level of the military, if you've ever lived on a military base, and these are all the people you're around. And so I just knew that if things become too extreme, the military is not going to go along with it, and if necessary, they'll stop it.
But
Well,
go back to the world wars.
mhm.
The soldiers did.
Well, because they didn't have that same ethos. Because so um, I've met someone who was in the Hitler Youth. He went to our church when we were living in Germany, and I spent some time talking to him, and he confirmed a lot of the things that you hear, which is this was all they knew. Because it's mind-boggling to me, because I was about the same age, because he went in at 14 or 15 in 45, as that last ditch, we're all about to die, so let's go out shooting thing. And he said he was lucky to be captured by the Americans because they treated him well, because he's a 14-year-old kid. And it just boggled my mind that even as a 14-year-old, I thought, I ain't doing that.
Mhm.
Not to protect what he was protecting, but that's all he knew. There
Mhm.
was no there
Well,
there there was nothing to counter the crazy.
let me add another string in that whole theory. Not that this is string theory, but let me add a string to the theory. They're trying to interject this ideology in schools. So at some point, it will be all they know. And but I'm not drawing conclusions here. I'm just stating a lot of facts.
Well, let me state another fact and let you draw your own conclusions. So, an interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is the Tiananmen Uprising in '89, I think it was. Um, when that happened, a lot of people don't remember that went on for days before it led to violence and was broken up. And that famous picture of this unknown man with some grocery bags standing in front of a column of tanks. Okay, and he stopped them. And eventually, because if all you know is the picture, you need to watch the video, because eventually Tank Commander opens the hatch and pops his head out and starts talking to the guy. And they end up, shaking hands. And so he halted that column of tanks. Those initial troops that were sent in were from units in and around Beijing. So these are more urban, more educated people who also have a sense that these are our neighbors. These are our family and friends and neighbors. Well, when that happened, the government yanked those guys out, went out to the boondocks and pulled in uh from far away units that had no connection to these people. They had no connection to Beijing. They were made up of more rural, less educated people, and they cared nothing for the people that were in front of them. And that's where you see the pictures in the video of stuff on fire and gunshots being fired into Tiananmen Square indiscriminately to break up the protest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw a meme. It was, we're being conditioned to believe that wanting freedom is selfish. And when you look at the flip side to it, the people who support the side that wants to take away freedoms are being conditioned that those people are selfish. And selfish is just a step further towards bad person. They're selfish. They just want they just think about themselves. They don't care about you. They don't care about grandma. They don't care about black people. They don't care about trans people. They don't care. Put X in there. They don't care. They only care about themselves. Oh, look, they're white. Everything they say is to further their own whiteness, their own agenda, because they are. And that's where they have their position in life. It doesn't matter what the sense doesn't have to be present.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to have a good place in life. It just has to be better than yours.
Right. And one of the reasons it's so effective is because selfishness is a negative trait. Selfishness is bad. Here's something I learned a long time ago when I would try and talk to lefty friends about free market capitalism and talk about Milton Friedman, whose key word was self-interest. These are it's the free market is nothing more than a bunch of individuals pursuing their own self-interest. Self-interest is not selfishness. And one of the problems, I think, with people who ascribe to left, especially far left economics, is that they equate the two. And there's nothing, not only is there nothing wrong with self-interest, but I would submit that self-interest is entirely moral, because you are morally obligated to take care of yourself, which would include your family, because part of taking care of yourself, especially if you have children, is taking care of your children. It's taking care of your family. It's taking care of your extended family. When when your mom calls you up because she needs trees trimmed, you go and you do it because that's part of your self-interest.
Well, and altruism is beneficial to the self too. Because if I have a good relation, like say with my neighbors, my life is going to be easier. Or if I, something catches fire on my house, they're more likely to help, or something like that. So altruism is necessarily beneficial to the self as well. But also people, one of the tenets of game theory is if there's a system, there inevitably people or any species, so I'm going to stick with humans though, but there will be people that try to game it. And so you will try to game the system, and which games work best for society as a whole. And one of the reasons we know, or one of the things that happens in a system of people, is some people will try to game it outside of those traits that are beneficial for everybody. And if they get caught, they become a pariah to that society, whether it's through legal avenues. Let's say they steal something and they go to jail, they get punished. So the system as a whole has to at least just try to reduce its gameability, where everybody working for an altruistic mean will benefit the self. Whereas if somebody does something for a selfish mean that is not altruistic, has a check and balance to be punished. And when we're talking about complex systems, we're trying to find, especially with people or personalities, we're trying to find, you don't try to make it perfect, you just make it least gameable, because any system, someone will try to game it. whether that's communism, capitalism, uh, democracy, dictatorship. Someone's going to try to game it, and in a good system will be ungameable. Our founding fathers knew that. They didn't know game theory, but they knew that. Uh, and they tried to make a system that was ungameable. And realistically, their failings in that system in the beginning were because they went outside the system.
Oh yeah, I mean that was
All
uh
men are created equal except these slaves. That was outside of the system. The system was all men who created equal. So they created the right system. They just didn't follow it.
because I was completely unplugged, I didn't realize that Frederick Douglass was once again making the rounds,
Uh-oh.
and that the podcast we listened to over the weekend, several of them referenced that his speech from 1850 whatever on July 4th had popped up and was making the rounds this summer, which I think is great because in it he talks about how much he loves the founding fathers and the founding because they created this system where he can and should be free. And this is coming from someone who suffered horrible abuse and saw
Mhm.
some of the worst that humanity has to
Well, and never
offer.
saw the best of it.
Mhm.
Never ever saw the best of it.
And he and yet he understood intellectually that abolitionism needed to be achieved, as I mentioned the other day, in contrast to William Lloyd Garrison, who thought the Constitution needed to literally be burned and started over if they were to achieve abolition and equality. And Douglas said, no, no, this is what will protect us. This is not only what guarantees our freedom because of the principles in these, that it shows that we as Americans are being contrary to our principles, but then once we are free, this is what's going to protect us. Let me take a sharp turn here because the stuff we've been talking about has got something percolating in my brain. Um, because you turned me on, turned me on to
I
chatting
do
with
that to a lot of people. It's okay.
chatting with Candace. For anyone who doesn't know about it, go give it a try.
The pun deepens.
Yes,
It it goes balls deep now.
yes, the very much so. Uh, so it's a good podcast. And one of the things that struck me is how great an interviewer she is, better than almost any actual journalist out there. And I don't know her academic or background or what work she's done besides the fact that she's an adult film star, um, which she talks about, and yet she is more journalist than most journalists. And the most recent one, I was listening to it, and she was talking to um, a chiropractor named Dr. Tommy John, who's apparently a thing on Instagram, which I don't. Okay, whatever. I'm not on that. Anyway, um, but he was talking about a lot of stuff that if you're someone like me, you're probably going to knee jerk immediately think, man, what a freaking hippie. But there was a lot of, and you and I have talked about this, of there's a lot to what he's saying, even if you don't know why. We've talked about how there's a lot to Eastern medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, even if the reason wasn't accurate. So for instance, I thought of this, I'm getting off track, but whatever. Chinese liniment, which we've used before. And there's a somewhat new move. I forget his name. He's been on Eric Cressy's podcast to get away from the old rice protocol of
Mhm.
arrest, ice, compression. Wait, what is it?
Wait, how new are you calling new?
Well, I mean, relative to the fact that for as long as I've been alive and before then, if you got an injury, this is what you did. You wrapped some ice around it, you elevated it,
Because I'm
and you
trying to
rested
think
it.
when we in sports medicine would have been for me 2008 or 2009. We'd already moved on.
Hmm.
So I don't know what you're calling new,
Okay.
but
Well, I mean, it's still out there. It's still what most people know, that okay, this is what you do with an injury. But this guy's
mm,
whole point, and I can't remember his name. I don't know if you do. This guy's whole point is, no, that doesn't make any sense. You need to promote blood flow in order to clear away the damaged tissue and the toxins. That's exactly what Chinese liniment is. is you beat the crap out of your hands and then you soak it in this stuff that even if they say it in different terms, they still understood the basics of we're trying to clear away that damaged tissue to promote healing. All right, and speaking of promoting healing, this is basically kind of in a nutshell what they were talking about on this podcast. That again, my knee-jerk reaction is you're a hippie, is basically positivity and the mind's ability to heal the body, which, you know, to my immediate thought of is, well, you're some hippie who thinks you can sit under a waterfall and do some Buddhist chants and cure your prostate cancer, and that's not how life works. But then there was kind of this light bulb moment because you said something interesting that I hadn't thought of, but makes sense even with my little limited knowledge of witchcraft. Um, is that there's evidence to show that basically if you exercise while you're in a bad mood, you have a negative effect. That, yeah, you get the calorie burn, but this other stuff, it happens because it's negative. I don't know if you want to explain the hormones, the biochemistry of what's happening there.
It's a stress response.
Mhm.
So we got physical and emotional stress and mental stress. And well, obviously, if you've been following us for any time, you know stress can be a good thing.
Mhm.
But if you go into a training session or training protocol or something with a negative stress response mentally, you're going to release those stress hormones, which are glucocorticoids, which precursors to cortisol. And this is a really basic explanation, but uh, it's one player and it's a major player because they start a cascade of other hormonal responses as well. But uh, if you go into a training session with those negative hormones just running rampant through your body, you could end up having a negative response to that training session, and that could be a negative mindset towards that training session. So, oh, I hate working out, I got to get on the treadmill for an hour, kids have been screaming at me all day, I'm too tired for this. Oh, but somebody told me I had to do it, or I got to fit in that bikini this summer. And the positive aspects of that training are nowhere near your mind, and you're just completely miserable about the situation. You're going to have a different effect than you would if you went into it with a more positive mindset, with a not a motivated mindset, but a process driven mindset, where you know, if I put in this work, I will get X result. It doesn't have to be woohoo, I'm excited, I want to go, the right music is on and everything, although that does help, especially in the early stages. But to know the positive impact and that you're doing something great for your body creates a different hormonal profile in your system at the moment. And when we got a complex system, all of these things play into it. So yeah, it's a negative physical response from a negative mindset, mind over matter to some degree. Now there's
Right.
an interplay back and forth where consistency does create the positive feedback loop from the other side,
Mhm.
where you start having that negative response when you miss something. And that's where I try to work towards when it, with
Mhm.
clientele and myself, on you actually feel worse mentally when you don't do the right thing physically. And so you can create a feedback loop that goes the other way, but that's the long-term process.
Well, it makes sense because we know intuitively as well as from a mountain of evidence that, I mean, one of the ways you go from being overweight to obese is you get yourself in this negative feedback loop of you feel bad because physically you feel bad because you're overweight, and mentally you feel bad because you're overweight, and those create hormones that make it harder to get out of that state, and then you self-medicate with food to make yourself feel better, and then you crash. because that's just a temporary dopamine and serotonin hit. So then you crash physically and you feel worse. And now you feel worse mentally because you gave into those cravings and you ate a bunch of crap you knew you shouldn't have. And this cycle starts going. And that's how you go from being overweight to obese. But then on the positive side, we know from numerous testimonials that people who are seriously ill or injured, the ones who survive are usually the ones like the cancer patients that come through chemo the best are usually the ones that go into it with a positive attitude.
Mm-hmm. Positive mental and physical state, both of those play into it.
Which is why you've got that you've added to that list of fitness components of the standard 5 that you get in the textbook is the mindfulness. But where this isn't just a complete change of subject, but is kind of a tangent, is it just kind of dawned on me, how does that influence where we're at right now as a society who continues to not just segregate ourselves into those bubbles we talked about, but then also constantly consume negative emotions, constantly consume negative news about the world and about people who disagree with us. I mean, what does that do to our mental and physical state? And what kind of negative feedback loop are we creating by constantly feeding that?
Oh, it completely breaks us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think with the bad people that be, I think that's on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We're creating a whole country, a generation at least, of mentally and physically broken people dependent on other people. There will be elites at some point, and those are the people that are not subjected to that mental stress. And the more of a follower you are, so I mean, looking at personality types, there's followers and there's born leaders. Uh, and then there's some that have the traits of the leaders, which means they can't follow, but they don't have the skills of a leader. And I think that's where I was for a long time, because I didn't have the skills I needed to take advantage of the fact that I couldn't follow people blindly. But some people are very good at being a blind follower, and society has need for that. But the problem is you're going to be gamed. If a bad actor takes advantage of the game, you're going to go along with it. And the majority of people fall into that category, because not everybody can be a leader. If everybody was a leader, we would be a bunch of small tribes across the world. And so being a follower is not a bad thing. It's just the fact that you have to make sure that the right people are playing the game that you're following. And I think that's one of the main messages I wanted to get out, was because the system's being gamed. And what we know from game theory is the first people to game a system are usually the benevolent ones. It's not usually the altruistic ones, because the altruistic ones are trying to be within the game beneficially to other people. And it's not till the malevolent ones are exposed that the altruistic ones fight. And so realistically, and we can go into lockdowns, but I think it goes way further back than that, because the APA is broken. American Psychological Association. APA is broken. It's woke, which is already broken because it's supposed to be scientific, and wokeism is the opposite of science, because you start with the conclusion. Well, shoot, I told you, everything it touches gets worse. The mental state of the country has gotten worse.
Yeah.
Over the last definitely 10 years, but probably further back than that. And it was broken back when I was a kid, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Because just anecdote, when I was in an abusive household, and when you went to therapy for abuse as a child back then, they wanted to figure out what was wrong with you provoking the person that was abusing you. And nowadays, that part got better, but now we've got this ever expanding definition of harm, and affirmation mindset in the professionals. So trans movement's a good example of this. And if you haven't heard of Abigail Schreier, try to get her stuff before it's completely canceled. But one of the things she brings up with the psychological community as professionals is they affirm the self-diagnosis of the patient, and then go along with the path of treatment based on the affirmation, the self, the foregone conclusion, instead of going through the process of finding the correct diagnosis. And that goes with a lot of things, but she speaks specifically on the trans movement. But now we've got a combination of that and an industry of medicine in general where increasingly, but for a long time, it's been, the answer has been throw medicine at it versus work on prevention or even long-term approach type healing methods. So, you know, you're obese, stomach surgery, versus how about we try diet and exercise for 6 months before we do something extreme like cut you open and make your stomach smaller.
And well, and I'd add to that is you need, let's try diet and exercise. And I know that's hard, so let's work on some strategies to make it work, right? So you've got to go into it knowing, I mean, way back to what we were talking about when we were kids and we would scrape the crap out of our hands and knees. You've got to go into it knowing life is difficult, but it's rewarding when you accomplish something difficult.
Well, this is a very complex issue because it goes back to the beginning of this conversation where we talked about interacting with other kids and learning the nuance of, well, that's part of, that's a big contributor to the psychological well-being of, because kids aren't exposed to that. They're not exposed to trial and error and tribulations and judgment. And this one might turn people away from me, but they're not exposed to bullying. And they're not taught that that's wrong, first of all, because a lot of adults on social media now don't know that bullying is wrong, apparently. And they're not taught that it's a negative social trait that has consequences in the end. They're just removed from it. And then they're not taught how to deal with it in their own mind, psychologically, and in real life. Because at some point, one of the skills of being bullied is you learn how to stand up to the bully. And
well, that's where I was gonna go, is the one of my earliest peeves about the anti-bullying movement is it started very early with this zero tolerance mentality in schools. Because when we were kids, and I got in some fights when I was in elementary school, and when you went to the vice
we
principal's
fought in
office,
elementary school, even though you refused to remember it.
I just don't remember it. I remember some of the fights I got into, but I don't remember fighting with you. I remember there's like a little brawl on the playground once. There was like a bunch of people. But anyway, so the several times I went in to the vice principal who did the paddling. First of all, we actually got paddled in school for a long time still, but separate issue. Who started it? What happened? At some point they stopped caring, but that matters because the violence itself isn't the problem. It's the why. Obviously, I mean, for crying out loud, it drives me crazy that the same people with this same kind of mentality of, well, violence is bad, these same people not that long ago were posting memes about punching a Nazi, and to them a Nazi was anyone who supported Trump. Wait a
Mhm.
minute, I thought violence was bad. What happened here? But that matters, that who started it? Why did this start? Were you both being jerks? Were you picking on him? Were you picking on someone else? Was this really the appropriate response to what? Okay, so he called you a name. So why did you punch him in the face? Is that really the appropriate response? These are all things that translate to real life because that's how life works. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's often confrontational because we're all unique. And so we don't always get along, we don't always agree.
Well,
And you
and
have to learn how to navigate that.
it plays into the division and the creep of harm because if you're never exposed to the real dickhead, it's easier to convince you that someone who's actually okay is a dickhead
Yeah.
because you need less to convince you.
Well, and that's where the thought you made me had is my first thought when you brought up bullying was the zero tolerance nonsense that I've hated for a long time. But you just kind of made me realize that I hadn't really thought of that before. But yeah, when you go out of your way to completely eliminate bullying before it even starts, you have just but what and one of the reasons it's so bad is because you've completely distorted what it means to be a bully. So younger people now don't actually know what it means to be bullied, and they think that I think this goes back to what I first started at. They think it's anything that makes them uncomfortable, and that's what this. I'm going to post something on an freaking online forum, and if you disagree with me, you're attacking me, you're bullying me. No, I'm disagreeing with you. But you're you don't you freak out over any confrontation, and yet you have no problems bullying someone else, being confrontational to other people, because you have no concept what it actually means because you were so sheltered when you went through school.
Well, consequences for what you do too,
Mhm.
because that person also never ran into someone on the schoolyard that punched him in the face for saying something offensive, because punching in the face got you expelled from school
Mhm.
or whatever. Uh so it's not even just bullies, it's sometimes that natural violent reaction to someone being a jerk to you when you're a
Yeah,
child, because they're children. They don't have that stop valve that we have as adults
right.
to say that person said this, but uh it's not socially acceptable for me to really just jack them in the face right now.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
So
interaction was productive for both sides.
yeah, so the kid needs to learn that through interaction. Uh so and so said my mom was a really bad thing, you know.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean, how many yo mama jokes do we still remember?
yeah. We used to just give them back. So the good reaction is to give one back, to give a yo mama joke back. But
Exactly.
the bad reaction was to punch somebody in the face. And that person knew not to be offensive. The person punching back knew not to punch people in the face because you
Mhm.
got in trouble, or the rest of the group didn't want to hang out with you because you're the person that punches people in the face when they just want to
Well,
tell a yo
more
mama
than
joke.
that, because it just occurs to me, how many fights did we get in an elementary school versus how many fights did we see? So how many lessons did we get that we didn't have to personally experience, but we experienced secondhand through seeing them? So
Mhm.
you've eliminated these lessons even for the people who wouldn't necessarily be inclined to get into these confrontations, but just from seeing them, you gain value from them, you learn from it, you gain that experience, and we learn so much more from experience than just from a lecture.
I got a thought. Sorry, gonna just barf on the mic here, but
Do it.
uh inclusion. Inclusion, the popular word, right?
Okay.
So this is part of social interaction. What do we learn as young children if you are not included? How to get included,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're doing something offensive
Huh.
and belligerent and you are excluded because of your actions, you learn not to do those things.
You're that little boy who doesn't like to take a bath. Well, eventually you're not going to have any friends.
Yeah, it's being sold that any exclusion is 100% completely based on identity politics. No, a lot of times exclusion is about your social skills. And you learn that at a young age because you want to be included. So you learn to basically socialize to your friend groups that you want to be a part of. And that's part of being you. That's not being you.
That is a great point, and it makes me think of, because I hadn't thought about the roots of it before, but I have long been around, and I wasn't putting it in terms of inclusion, but I've long been ranting about acceptance, that it's not enough for the regressive left, it's not enough for you to allow or tolerate my behavior. You have to accept it. And I was saying that a decade ago when the gay marriage debate was really getting going, that look, my problem here is that a lot of these people, a lot of you people, you don't just want me to allow gay marriage, you want me to accept it, and I'm just not going to do that. And you're putting this on the government, which means you're going to force it. And then we have bakers being sued and venues being shut down because they won't go along. Well, that's what this is this move to inclusion, that no, you can't ignore little Timmy, even though he refuses to bathe and he's got, snot all over his face. No, he has to be in the group. He has to be in the group. You have to play with him. No, I don't. I don't have to accept him. And frankly, it's better for little Timmy if I don't accept him until he moderates some of his offensive behavior.
Or he finds
At least when he's around
find
me.
a real friend.
Yeah. And that's part of that social give and take that we just don't have, because we're all kind of being put on these conveyor belts that this is the way life should be and you're all going to accept it. Well, eventually you get out in the real world and that's not how it works.
Well, it does if you force it to work, because the government
but
says
again,
so.
It doesn't necessarily if you force it to, because how many times have we noted about how the left is eating its own? Because even amongst these people who accept the conveyor belt and who promote the conveyor belt, eventually they run into something even on their own side where you're not woke enough. You didn't do the right thing. You didn't say the right thing or support the right thing.
It's the nature of the beast with that, though, because
Mhm.
all these activists have their agenda, and eventually those agendas are going to clash. And I do think that's one of the big differences between the left movement and the right movement is the left is chaotic to some degree, and it should be. It's, again, the more liberal mind, the yang, you know, uh tends to be more chaotic, tends to be more all over the place. It needs to be grounded in principles, and that's where they've lost it. They're not grounded in, that's the model of the United States was a principle that liberal ideals could prevail. The problem is they've trashed the principle, and so now it's just a bunch of liberal ideas, or progressive ideals, excuse me. They've lost liberalism because that key word is liberty. But or on the right, there is a set structure. There is a kind of a common mindset even amongst different minds, where it's, we want security, we want safety, we want this comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that requires little, that requires less clashing. They want not to clash, and they tend to come hard on anything that disrupts that system. But for the most part, they want less conflict in there. So that it's a nature of the beast of the left. And without that backbone of the principles, the liberal order, then it's eventually going to fall apart. And realistically, we want that falling apart to accelerate those of us that are trying to stop this process from
Right.
happening.
Well, the tricky bit is we want that uh that collapse of the regressive totalitarian left to accelerate without taking the country with it. And that's my worry, is that they have so infested so many institutions that if they collapse, they'll bring a big chunk of the country with it and create really dangerous
Well,
chaos.
there's going to be healing time no matter what at this point. Our university systems are completely broken.
Mhm.
I mean, where do you go from here when, what is it, 90 something percent of university professors are left leaning,
Mhm.
and radically so for the most part nowadays. Uh, where do you go from there with that? And the system itself is broken because it became a bureaucracy that needs money. And two movements collided with a university needing money and a bunch of people wanting to spread an ideology and give degrees because of it. And so we could get the money of those people that are getting these doctorates in uh, feminist glaciology, uh, and at the same time we're training our army, who has no skills for the real world other than activism based on all this training. So two things collided there, and uh, that needs to be fixed somehow. And I have no solutions on there other than some sort of downsizing. But what do you think?
Well, I think that's a good place to bring up Heath's rule of life number one. Whatever the problem, government is the cause. If you have a something you think is a problem, I can guarantee you that as you start to trace it back, the problem will ultimately be government action that created this. So when it comes to higher education and the mess that it is, the reason is because they don't have to live in the real world, because the government isn't bound by financial reality like you and I are, when we have to sit down and decide, okay, what are we going to spend our money on? How are we going to save? Let's plan for the future. The government's not bound by that. Even states who ostensibly should be, because they can't print their own money like the federal government can. Look at California. They are teetering on the brink of financial collapse governmentally, because they just haven't cared. They just keep going and going. Well, that's what happened to higher education, is government got into it, started throwing free money at it, and then it became this bloated mess. If you want to force higher education to be responsive to their customers, which aren't even the students, they're the parents, they're the people paying the bills,
Hmm.
right? So it would have been you as a student paying your own way through, but
Paying
uh
now?
yeah, paying now still,
Yeah.
but it's the people paying the bills. Well, the the people paying the bills now, I mean, it's, you don't even have to I took out a bunch of loans and grants and whatever. It's not even real. It's somewhere in the future. And on top of that, just on top of the student loan infrastructure, which ballooned prices, then you have massive infusions of um, government, straight government cash in the form of grants or budgets from states and federal governments, but then also government subsidized cash, because you have huge infusions of people creating trusts because they're trying to protect their money because of the complicated Byzantine tax scheme we have. So look, you want to make
There's a lot of things that just run down that, the tributaries to that same massive river. You got the ideal that you're nothing without a college degree,
mhm,
which is completely not true. Because
which mostly comes from government mandated, force you to go to
Mhm.
secondary education, which I mean, it has been for a long time, but especially when we were growing up, high school was entirely geared toward getting you into college.
Well, yeah, it is, and you look at the movements in the uh, the minority populations, there's no push for trade school or anything like that. There's no push for apprenticeships. There's only push for university.
Mhm.
And then you add to that where one of the places the activists are right, there is a deficiency in their primary school, in their education in high school, and so they're pushed to go to university when they have
Not prepared to not prepared to succeed there.
yeah, not prepared to succeed there. And realistically, this is almost 70% of America really from a being a good financial decision has no business in university. Most of the world would benefit greatly from learning a trade, getting
Or just
technical.
learning on the job. Just go to a job and start learning on the job.
Oh, did I give this weekend? Did I give you my rant about McDonald's?
Yep. Do it. Do it.
Okay, so this is my challenge to anybody out there that's got the time for this and is complaining about the man and the government and minimum wage. Go get a minimum wage job. Go start at a fast. I'm going to bring up McDonald's just because 1998. So I was 99. I was 19 years old. I worked at McDonald's and I did this and it worked. And it wasn't because I was white, because everybody else there was white because it was in Oklahoma. So it was an equal playing ground based on color of skin. But go get a minimum wage job at a fast food restaurant.
Hold on, because minimum wage is a touchy subject for me. It actually won't be minimum wage most likely, because almost every large chain starts you at higher than minimum wage.
Okay, go get an entry level job at a
Yeah.
fast food restaurant. No matter what your degree, what your skills,
Mhm.
lie about it. Tell them you don't have a degree if they want to say you're overqualified. Whatever. Get a job. Show up 15 minutes early every day. And then you be the best at whatever their position they have you in, whether it's making the burgers or working the drive-through or working the front. You try to be the best you can be at that every day. You try to be the best person in the store every day. Competition, oh, bad word. Everybody gets a trophy.
Don't be afraid to ask questions to try and make yourself better at whatever it is you're
that's
doing.
part of being the best. So you try to be the best. You work hard, you pay attention to what you're doing. That's the main thing. Focus on the task at hand instead of thinking about that.
Instead of looking at your feet while you're walking towards the Grand Canyon.
And get off your damn phone for a work shift. But you try to be the best person in that store every day. And here's I'll put money on it with anybody who wants to take this challenge. You're going to be a shift leader in 6 weeks. So you're gonna half again add to your salary. All right. So if you started a minimum wage at 750, or what was it, 725?
I think it's 750 now.
750, then you're going to be making over $10 an hour. 6 weeks. In a year, you're going to be an assistant manager. You've doubled your salary again, if not more. In another year or two, you're going to be a store manager. So 3 years, and you're making more than most people coming out of college. 4-year degree. 3 years, you're making more than that. And all you had to do was show up 15 minutes early and flip burgers well.
And then I'll add to that, with that money you're making as a store manager, then you scrimp and you save, and eventually you're a franchise owner, because you can save up enough to buy in.
Okay, and I think McDonald's even has a system where you can work towards that with their McDonald's U.
I have heard that there are franchises where you can do that, where you don't have to pay the full upfront. I think it's, last I heard, I think it was like 1.5 million to buy into a McDonald's franchise or something. Like, it might be more than that. But a lot of them have mechanisms where you don't actually have to pay that full upfront, so that you can get in and get going earlier. The point being, all you ever did was go get an entry level job, and now you're a small business owner in one of the biggest corporate brands worldwide.
And the argument against that that process is flipping burgers is beneath me. Not if you want to own a franchise, because it's the start. Going to class every day is beneath me, but I needed to do it to get my degree, right? No, it's not beneath me. Nothing's beneath you. Everybody get that out of your head. Nothing's beneath you. Some people's treatment of you is beneath you, and then
Yes.
you stand up for yourself. That's it. But any job
Yeah.
that gets you towards your goal is not beneath you. And if your goal is paying the bills, well, we've got a broad spectrum we can go through.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, that's back to the selfish and I'll add that to the selfish and arrogance. And part of the reason you're able to be selfish and arrogant is because we are a very comfortable and coddled people now. I was hanging out with a mutual friend and we got to laughing and talking about how, well, of course he grilled up a bunch of food and made too much food because we're from the South and that's what you do, especially if you're from the rural South, because that's how you were raised. And we were laughing about how, so he's from the Carolinas, East Coast. I'm from, Oklahoma, and most of my family's in Oklahoma. And yet we grew up astoundingly similarly, especially when it came to extended family. Of when we went on vacation, it was almost always to visit family, and it was built all around lunches and dinners. Like, okay, so we're
I
gonna
know I joined in on those
you
at
joined
some
in on
point.
some of these, and
Yes.
it's okay. We're going here first. When we get in, it's gonna be dinner time, and so we got to make sure we're at great grandma's here because we're gonna have dinner, and these aunts and uncles are gonna be here, and then we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna go here, and there was always a lunch and a dinner involved. And as this friend was mentioning, is it's directly from the Great Depression. It's the harshness that these people had to grow up in, that generation had to grow up in, where people were literally starving to death, which is almost impossible to imagine in America, where we have an obesity crisis. People were literally starving to death. People didn't have enough food, and it was on you to take care of your family and your neighbors. And so the person who had food fed the others who didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
so that became an integral part of socializing. And now it's it, I mean, for crying out loud, now we have entire networks on TV dedicated to food. That's what it's become, because we don't understand that hardship. We don't understand where this is coming from. It's all about, just the good times and the good flavors of getting together and sharing a meal.
Well,
And
it's not by accident. Food is food and procreation are the number one drivers in getting you to get up in the morning. That was an unintended pun, but no, to move. They're the number one drivers, because when you need to survive, you have to go find food, water, and if you want a genetic lineage, which we're all driven to do, you have to procreate. So if you understand that those are innate drivers within you, you understand why there's such a big deal in society, especially the more expansive our society becomes. It has to be adapted to the modern world we live in, which we're not doing very well. An Oreo cookie, there someone may have improved on it, but when Oreos were pretty relatively newer and the science was catching up, that people know what they're doing. Again, the people on top know what they're doing. It was the perfect blend of carbohydrate, simple sugars, salts, and fat to be addictive. It was the number one perfect blend for most of the population to just want to eat all of them. And that was part of the contributor to me getting fat in college.
the other
Was
was chicken fried steak.
chicken, no, yeah, chicken fried steak, double mashed potatoes, mystery cube. You remember the mystery cube?
I remember the mystery cube. I'd
And
forgotten about the mystery cube, but I remember the mystery cube.
I do love chocolate chip cookies and Oreo cookies and the cookie dough. I found out you could use your meal swiper, and I had a scholarship, so I had unlimited meal swipes on my meal swiper, and you could go to the little convenience store and swipe your meal thing and get all the Pepsi and chocolate chip cookie dough you wanted. And
Oh yeah.
for those that don't know the story, which is everybody listening right now, I gained 80 pounds my first semester of school.
I didn't know it was that much. I knew you put the freshman 15 to shame. I knew that.
I went from 160 to 240. So in one semester, not my freshman year, my first semester of college, I gained 80 pounds. And it was going from an environment where I was hanging out with friends so I could eat food at their house, to an environment where I could just take this little plastic card everywhere I wanted and eat whatever I wanted. And as long as you stayed in that room, you could eat whatever you want until you leave. And I would frequently have 6 plates stacked up from the chicken fried steak, which I loved. And then I learned how to cook it, and then we would make it even when we moved out of the dorms.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in that the eating halls more than I was in class, which is why I had to drop out of school for 10 years and then go back. But yeah, gained 80 pounds and had a bad GPA, and we've learned a lot of lessons there. But food is good.
It's what drives us, and again, it's one of those things where I really think we need to understand how good we've got it. And if you don't know how good you've got it, go camping sometime and don't bring food. Just do that old school roughing it camping where you're gonna catch your own food and see how well you eat. Okay. Learn to hunt. Yeah, and even with the modern conveniences of modern weapons, see how easy it is to fill your belly when you go to hunt for your own food. And think about, all right, I spent all day shooting these 12 little birds. I'm really freaking hungry right now, to the extent that I could eat all of these at once. So that means you got to go do it again tomorrow.
Well, shoot, I'll even one up that challenge. Take food and just not be at home. And you're like, oh God, that sandwich wasn't enough. Or
yeah.
It's we are very spoiled by our insulated walls and kitchens and Uber Eats and stuff, convenience stores. But here's a simpler way to do it, and this is something I suggest with most of my clients. Other than medical issues that might, so let me do the disclaimer: consult your doctor before doing anything I suggest of any time, and that includes our political talks too, because
if you consult your doctor about our political talks, your doctor's probably going to get pretty annoyed.
Do it anyways, just to cover our ass.
But do it anyway.
Yeah. Go on a 48-hour fast.
Mm-hmm.
I any more than that, and you're kind of just trying to, be it may have benefit or whatever, but 48's a good number. Go on a 48-hour fast, because you're going to learn a lot about yourself in the last 20 hours of that fast. It hits me about 35. I've done it several times. I need to do it again. I haven't done it in a long time. But you learn some things, and the great thing about an experiment like that is that you learn everything you learn is about yourself. And so all the blaming you do of everything around you for your own failings goes out the window, because you start to learn your own anatomy to some degree. A key one is, when am I hungry versus when do I just want to eat? And so you learn the difference between psychological hunger and real hunger.
And that's when you got me doing this. That's one of the first things I noticed is that as someone who has struggled with depression and anxiety and is now medicated for it, and I would that's where my weight gain and loss is my mood and if I'm eating to self-medicate. And if you do this, you'll realize you have more willpower than you think you do.
Mm-hmm. And the other part is you learn uh well, here's a good one. You learn that everything you're being told about nutrition is wrong. Because what the diet industry wants you to think is that if you don't eat every 3 or 4 hours, your brain is going to die and you're not going to be cogent, and it's going to lead to weight gain and all these things. I said this in the onset of our podcast is why can I talk on all these subjects is because I've dealt with misinformation my whole career and how to wade through it and how to assimilate where the truth is. And here's a good way to figure it out. Go through it. And what you actually find is the real science, the real scientists, the people who aren't trying to sell you something new all along, is that you actually become more aware the longer you go. Now, obviously, there's a statute of limitations on this. At some point, you will start losing energy to the brain.
Your body does need nutrients. Yes,
it does need nutrients, but it's not 3 hours. It's more like 3 days. So if you're in that 48 hours, and it's about, for me, I did it probably 5 or 6 times. It's about the 33 to 35 hour mark. You actually become an ultimate hunter. All your senses are enhanced because your body says, we're starting to really need food, go get it. And so you're thinking clearly, your senses are enhanced. You can smell colors, man. It's an amazing feeling. Now, after that amazing feeling, you're really freaking hungry. But that's when you learn what real hunger is. So now you're at the point where it's like, okay, my body is telling me you really need to eat right now or you're going to die. And it's giving you that warning about 2 days in advance. So now you can go on that trek to find that food.
Right.
And even if you're a biblical person with the 6,000 year timeline, 6,000 years ago, we didn't eat every day. We're not made for this abundance of available food. We're made for sporadic gorging, basically.
I will quibble slightly as the resident supposed Christian in the group that if you're a radical biblical person, because this is one of the things that annoys me about the YouTube atheists I've seen, they all seem to think that all or almost all Christians are young earthers. No, we're not. It's a very small group of people, but that's not the point.
No. I just made the extreme point because if you're that, then you're anything in between.
Yeah. Exactly. But the reason I was stabbing my eyes out when you were talking is because your talk about, if you don't eat every 3 hours, you're not going to die, reminded me of something that we talked about this weekend that I'd forgotten about and then forgotten about again because I wanted to because it was so stupid. So one of the certifications I got, and this was the better one, actually. I don't know if you remember this, but
are you going to talk about the cows grazing?
Yep.
Okay.
So and I'm going to make it worse too because I thought of something else.
So when he was really new in this, he would always send me things like, "Oh, I read this in this book," or "I'm taking this cert. Yeah. What do you think about this?" And he talked about stabbing his eyes out. I think I still have a screwdriver stuck in here somewhere from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I still keep this. The first cert I got was this crappy, stupid, the box gym I was working at. I don't know if the box gym you were working at did the same thing, but it was this, here, just go online to this thing and pay like 40 something bucks and get this certification. All right, you're a personal trainer now. I still keep that one to show. That's like one of the first things I show people if I'm actually going to sell in my little notebook, if I'm actually trying to sell training to someone, one of the first things I show them is, this is the first cert I got. It's garbage, and you need to know this so that you know this is why so many people think personal trainers are crap. Anyway, the second one I got, which was actually the better one, and is, I mean, their textbook is very good, except the nutrition part. Because one of the things that I read in the nutrition part that made my head explode and start ranting at Sam is that one of the justifications for eating lots of small meals is because that's what animals do when they're constantly grazing. And most herbivores have a good lean mass ratio. So we should be imitating that and constantly grazing, which is which should strike anyone, unless they're a hardcore vegan with an agenda, as asinine. But I didn't realize until you brought it back up how dumb it has become, because I'd forgotten that I had somebody ask me about this stupid Netflix documentary that Netflix keeps trying to get me to watch. Stop recommending it to me. Every time I say I'm not interested, you won't listen to me. So this Game Changers documentary that's all about these elite, high performance, top of their game athletes who have switched to plant-based diets. And I had
TC
someone ask me
Loma has
about
a good
this.
review of that.
Do what?
TC Loma has a good review of
CC
that.
Loma.
T
Okay, well,
Nation, yeah.
well,
He talks about the cherry picking of athletes and stuff.
right. Well, I'm not, in case the person watches this, I'm not gonna mention who watched this, but I will mention that my dad is a veterinarian. And so when this person asked me, I went to my dad and I said, "What?" Because as related to me by the person asking about this, because I'm supposedly a fitness professional, what do you think about this? One of the claims that's made in the documentary is that, well, animals eat plants and turn it into protein. We can do the same thing. So why not just skip the middleman and just not eat the meat, just eat the plant and make the protein yourself? And my dad, who is obviously older than I am, surprisingly, and is even more grumpy old man than I am when it comes to these things. He could not believe what he was hearing. And he went on this long, diatribe that you would have understood because it's all witchcraft about the biochemistry of, well, yeah, but an herbivore, there's a reason a cow has whatever it is, 4 stomachs, because it has a very complicated mechanism to turn that plant into protein. It has different hormones than we do in order to turn that plant into protein. Our mechanisms are different.
Well, and you look at animal studies in general. That's one reason rats are used often, is because they're omnivores. Same with pigs. Pigs are used often because they're it's not surprising with the current political climate, but we're very genetically close to pigs. And we got a lot of good science from pig studies. But when you look at a diet study, you can't compare us to a carnivore or an herbivore. You have to use another omnivore, because we're really good multitaskers when it comes to a species. We're really good at processing different types of food, especially with nutrition. So we have molars for grinding. We've got teeth in the front for cutting. We have canines. We have all of that. And that's clue number one, that we probably should be eating all of that. And if a vegetarian wants to come to me and says, you need to eat more vegetables, it's like, sometimes I slip. Yep. That's a good point.
Yep.
But to say that, but don't eat any meat. Do you have a religious reason for this?
Exactly.
Or
That's interesting that you say that, because we've never talked about this before. And when clients would ask me about nutrition, and I live in an area with a lot of Indian people, and so I would get asked about nutrition, and I would get asked, what do you think about vegetarian diets? And the first thing I would ask them is, well, are you doing it for religious or moral reasons, or are you doing it for health reasons?
Mhm,
Because if you're doing it for religious or moral reasons, that's none of my business. I'm not going to comment on
mhm.
that. But if you're doing it for health reasons, yeah, I have some things to say.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can get your proper protein profile from a vegan diet. It's just very complicated.
Yeah.
Uh, and there are vegan specialists in nutrition that are very good at it. Uh, because obviously there are bodybuilders and athletes that are vegan.
Yeah.
Uh, you can get it. It's just complicated, and you have to pay attention to it. But if you're trying to be vegan because it's better, that's a different argument because it's not better.
Yeah.
It is easier to get your protein profile from a diet that consists of meat and animal adjacent products like milk and eggs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, you want better. It's not better. Uh, and but at
But
the same,
and one of the things that drives me crazy about it is it's what it is it's an agenda. It's people pushing an agenda. So in this text, one of the other things that made my head explode was talking about um, raw or whole foods. You want as few additives as possible because your body is going to, and this is true, generally speaking, uh, your body is going to absorb nutrients much better if it's in its original form. You don't absorb nearly as much. Like say you're taking an iron supplement, and it's by whatever 200 milligrams of iron. Well, your body might only absorb like 40 of that, versus if you eat a big bowl of spinach, your body's going to absorb a lot more of it. Okay.
bioavailability is complicated. So
Speaking generally here, in general terms, one, to make it not so complicated for anyone listening, and two, because I hate this witchcraft. But the point was, then just not a paragraph later, uh, says this same text says that, if you have a problem with, you know, you don't need cow's milk because you can get soy milk now that's fortified with all this stuff. Wait a minute. You just said that that's not as good. And now you're saying to do this, you're pushing an agenda here. You're blending this good, well-established science with your agenda.
well, and that's the thing is bioavailability is a complex issue,
Mhm.
and this is one of those where you do need a lot of education to break it down. Because I could go into the fact that this maybe slightly adult beverage makes it harder for me to absorb magnesium from my food. So we got a lot of interplay there, and
Yeah.
but sometimes, and I'm going to be careful with my wording here because one of the problems with the political movements is they oversimplify complex problems.
Mhm.
But a lot of times, complex systems are best served by simplified solutions. And I, a simplified solution is I would encourage people to eat more very raw sources of their food. So, eat your meats and cook them enough that the bacteria is dead, but at the same time, you still have not pink slimed meat. Lots of whole fruits and vegetables and a good variety. And
Mhm.
the color rule applies. If it's got lots of different colors, it has lots of different nutrients. So different nutrients create those colors. So the color rule applies to your vegetables, and get all of them, get every bit of them.
That's
So
why I
I
like
would
bell peppers.
Oh, I love. I'm growing the pimentos and
Uh-huh.
the little sweet peppers. I got two plants coming up, so hopefully I got plenty of those because I eat them just
Yeah.
like
because you get a lot of different colors with those,
Yeah, yeah, on the same plant
with those
even.
different, yeah, and then the
Yeah,
different varieties.
yeah, but at the same time, if so we're gonna take a simple solution: eat more of that,
Yeah.
and you're gonna get what you need. That's fine. Okay, we're great, but uh, but then you can't ignore the fact that sometimes processed isn't bad. And so now the whole 30 and all those groups are gonna go like, oh my gosh, you're Satan, because guess what? Barilla makes high protein noodles. You like spaghetti? You can get half the carbohydrates and extra protein because you can get Barilla high protein noodles. HEB here, and what's the other brand? I get it. There's another brand, but high fiber tortillas. So again, I can have my tacos without getting all of that extra,
Mhm.
you know, just simple flour.
Well,
So
and this is something you touched on earlier when we were talking, when we were talking fitness, is that, people get in their head that, oh, this thing must be good, so more of this thing must be better. No, stop doing all your exercises on a Bosu ball.
mhm.
Okay, sometimes you need, in fact, a lot of times you need stability. Okay, look,
Oh yeah,
the
shoot,
the
we could go a whole. What time is it? I don't.
I mean, we said we were just going to kind of rant and ramble here, and we've been talking for 3 hours about more or less the same topic.
Yeah, because I could go on the subject of balance when it comes to
Uh-huh.
physical balance, and I think that's what you're alluding to there.
Hmm.
Is it's not as simple in the marketing sense of throwing you on an unstable surface and you're going to get better, but it is simple on a biological sense where we can work on it in any position. And sometimes you need to get into a more stable environment to work on an unstable surface, because that's how your brain works and it
I've
learns.
got very wonky hips and knees, especially my right knee that likes to, my right leg likes to move around and not track properly, as you noticed when we were doing stuff over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna kill myself if I, do some of the unbalanced stuff that I see a lot of people doing. But I can actually work on my balance by being flat on the floor. In fact, that's the best way for me to do it, because I've got to retrain that leg to move the way it's supposed to move.
Well, we're always balancing, so even if you're on 2 feet, uh it doesn't feel the same, but the constant interplay between the movement of your body and how your structure is working to keep you centered, that's balance. And if you have great balance even on 2 feet, I can walk up and push you and you won't go anywhere, or at least very minimally go anywhere.
Mhm.
uh, and those exact same skills translate to being on 1 foot. uh, so realistically, the balance training starts with a 4 point stance. I put them on all fours and then have them move on all fours. Something like a bear crawl.
Mhm.
People underestimate the benefit of something like a bear crawl for balance. It's harder to balance in a bear crawl position than it is uh, standing on 1 foot but not doing anything. So if you're crawling across the floor, the interplay of all the different structures in your body is a highly coordinated effort. Whereas just standing there on 1 foot, once you've become static, and if there's no other influence, then it's static. So it uh, you saw from our talk that I could go on for an hour on that one. And if we do that as a fitness subject, I need that screenshot I sent you for my kind of like visual template.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Uh
Which, yeah, we could dive into the details there, but the point is, just because balance is a very important part of life and fitness and your programming doesn't mean it has to be the focus of every single thing you do while you're training.
well,
Yeah.
that's the magic pill approach.
Hmm.
That's the magic pill approach. That's with everything we've talked
Yeah.
about.
Eating raw foods is better in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons. So I'm going to eat nothing but raw foods. Wait, no, hold on a second. You don't need to go that far. And in fact, for a lot of us, that's going to be detrimental because, like you said, you know, I don't really care about pasta. I can take it or leave it, but there's people in this house that love eating pasta, and I don't love eating those carbs. Okay, well, I can get a high protein or a high fiber pasta, balance it out. I can get, a different kind of tortilla, balance it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not everything processed is bad. Not everything whole is good, especially in certain amounts. You want me to kill vegans right now?
Yes, do it.
Yes.
Do
Okay,
it.
so the vegan Bible, the China study, meat causes cancer. Okay. So one of our themes over the last 9 or 10 or whatever it is episodes, we should be able to keep counting single digits. I feel bad that I don't know which episode this is.
It, in our defense, we did the first episode like 3 times, but we kept having technical difficulties.
But we've got enough digits,
eh.
and I could take my socks off. But one of the themes is bad science for an agenda, and here's the vegan Bible is the China study, and what they did is they took a bunch of rats, and it's a rat study, and they fed one group of rats a high protein diet with animal protein. I think casein was the protein, which would be a lot of your milk, cheese protein, and then an all vegetable diet to another group, and a control group, which was mixed. They ate whatever they wanted, and they exposed them to carcinogens, known carcinogens that cause cancer, and evaluated how high the prevalence of cancer was in the different groups. And so that they're exposed to a carcinogen that causes cancer, they have different diets, and they had different results. And so the all protein group had a high incidence of cancer. The all vegan group had almost none, and the control group had something lower than the protein group, but still more than the vegan group. So the protein group, the animal protein group had the highest incidence of cancer. So study comes out, eating meat causes cancer. Boom, big headlines everywhere. It's the vegan Bible. It's like the basis of the movement. So we got to dig into the methods a little bit on this one, because based on that, they're right, correct? I mean, thousands of rats. It's a big number. You can reproduce rats like crazy. So it seemed like damning evidence if you just read the conclusion and the abstract. The methods, there's a pretty big reason why there was almost no incidence of cancer in the vegan group. Can you guess what it is? I know we've never talked about this. Can you guess what it is?
I mean, there are a number of variables that it could be. Activity level is one that jumps to mind.
Oh, that was all controlled for.
Okay.
There's something that wasn't controlled for though.
Well, then my other thought would be, okay, how much and what kind of whatever did they feed to the meat group? Because that's how the saccharin study came to be, that diet soda was going to give you cancer.
Well, same amount of carcinogens, same calorie control and everything.
I have no idea.
The vegan group rats died from the carcinogen directly before they could get cancer.
It reminds me of Ron White's bit on vegetarians, and I'm feeling a little sick. There must have been some beef in that broth I had. Your system's kicking back, broth? You ain't healthy.
So the carcinogen itself killed the vegan group because they weren't as robust as the mixed and the the protein group. So they were hardier creatures in general. So a follow-up study happened, and it was on chimpanzees, and someone noticed that that death rate occurred. And so what they did was they did everything the same, except they said, well, first of all, we want to be more humane to these chimpanzees, but also we want a better outcome to the study. So they reduced the carcinogen to be much more mild relatively to the,
so that it wouldn't kill them directly.
so it wouldn't kill them directly, hopefully. Yeah. And so what they ended up was a complete opposite result. So the vegan group had more incidence of cancer than the protein group. So if it didn't kill you directly, but yeah, that's bad science for you.
Now, was it bad science, or was it bad science reporting? Because were this other people took this conclusion and ran this direction with it, or was it reported in the study that way?
It was reported in the study that way.
Okay, because I know, like I referenced the saccharin one, and I don't know how many people will remember that in the 90s, saccharin was one of those. I mean, as we were ranting about, is at one point coffee was going to kill you, and now it's good for you. Eggs were going to kill you, and now it's good for you. You know, these things come and go, and we grew up with all this crap. And one of them was that diet soda causes cancer, because there was a study in rats that showed that saccharin caused cancer. Well, except that if you look at their methodology, they pumped so much saccharin into these rats, you could have given them anything and they would have gotten cancer from it, because you put so much of this chemical in them.
They did the same thing with salt. Mm-hmm. So sodium, your sodium recommendation for those out there and watching their sodium because of high blood pressure, consult your doctor. Don't just listen to me. I'm just giving information. You draw your own conclusions. But it was rat studies, and they pumped them with what would be the equivalent of much exponentially higher than what the recommendation is. So they pumped them full of a bunch of salt, and we got hypertension as a result. And so they said, oh, salt causes hypertension, so we're going to give this randomly arbitrary recommendation that's under that number. But again, it's like to the power of 10 under that number. So it's like, well, there's a lot of room between 2.5 grams and the equivalent 10,000 grams. That's 9,998 grams of room. So, yeah. But I will say about animal studies, I'm not pooping on animal studies, because there's a lot of things we have to know that we can't test on humans.
Yeah.
I mean, try getting an IRB for pumping somebody full of 10 grams of salt a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, because it's not humane. It's not.
The problem with any study is, what, as we talked about last time, what is your methodology? And so I'll always be concerned with someone who just is obviously trying to give you an agenda or trying to sell you something.
Yeah. But there you go, vegans. If you're still saying meat causes cancer, that's what it's based on. If you want to tell me to eat more vegetables, you're probably right. If you want to say vegetables are more efficient than meat, then you're wrong. If you have a religious reason or cultural reason for doing it, that has nothing to do with the facts on nutrition. So I'm not going to argue with you.
Then exactly, you know, you do you, and you make those kinds of moral and philosophical questions for yourself, but don't come trying to quote science at me and demanding that I change my life when you're not using science. Who was it we were listening to that said we need to distinguish between science and the science? Was that Glenn Lowry? No, that was Lindsay. I think that was Lindsay.
Was that Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that was Lindsay. I don't remember who he was on. I think it was one of those first ones we listened to. The Angels one. Who's that guy? Something or other Angels.
Okay, that was Lindsay. Braver Angels was
Braver
the
Angels
podcast he was on.
Yeah. So so we need to distinguish between science and the science. The science is settled. The science says, okay, okay, now you're not actually using science, you're using agenda-based manipulation of numbers.
Well, as someone in the scientific community and who follows a lot of even more prominent people in the scientific community, the people who actually work in science make fun of the people who say listen to the science,
Mhm.
because they're usually not the same thing. uh and I understand that what we talked about in the last one about looking into a study takes some training and takes some ability to read the academic work because it's written in a different language.
Mhm.
uh and not only that, you have to, if someone gives you a p-value, you got to know what a p-value is. If someone uh talks about creatine kinase markers in your blood, well, you got to know the function of creatine kinase before you got to understand what enzymes are before you understand why that's relevant to a study on muscle hypertrophy.
Or heck, they're giving you numbers and it's in nanograms. And not only do you not know what a nanogram is, but you don't even know what that symbol means because they're not, because they're going to give you the symbol for it. And it's like, okay, what does this, what does this mean? How do I
Mhm.
visualize,
Or they say
you
parts
know,
per million, and you're like, per million of what?
yeah, yeah.
So I understand that, but you can still get an idea of why that might or might not match their conclusion,
Mhm.
or match the conclusion the journalistic article that cited them. uh
A good example of that would be you don't have to be an engineer or a physicist to watch Mythbusters. And as much as I love the show, how often did I say, well, wait a minute, why did you do that, but you didn't do this?
mhm.
What about if you did this instead of that? Then that would change your results. So they give you this definitive conclusion at the end, and you're going, but wait a minute, what about this thing?
Well, and it can even get simpler than that, because in my deep dives into uh things like Ibram Kendi, just checking their sources and see what the
Mhm,
source is,
mhm.
because Kendi is extremely guilty for this. Is he would cite something as a fact based on literature, and you go to his bibliography at the end, and it's actually a journalistic article on possible literature, and then you follow that article. And this is part of the strategy. I don't, people try to give Kendi a pass on this, that
Mhm.
he just believes, but no, he does this crap on purpose, and he's trained to do it. uh it's a web of he sources somebody who sourced somebody who sourced somebody. So you get into this time consuming looking up one source and having to look up another source, and then having to look up another source to see where this information even came from. And so he'll make a very big statement on something like housing prices in Mississippi during the 1990s, and it's based on an article from the 70s, based on another article that cited a statistical analysis by whatever business school. And by the time you've gone through four sources, you find out that that was kind of even irrelevant to the statement he made. And unless you take the time to do that,
Mhm.
you don't know that. But most people are going to say, oh, source, it must be right.
It
And
makes me curious. As part of a mental exercise in masochism, I almost want to take some of these classes and see how they're taught. Because even as left leaning as the history field is, because it's a humanities course and that's just the way it works, that would never work. So as an example, the YouTube channel World War II, which is doing World War II in real time weekly, and and they're a good teaching source, but they're not a real history source. And as an example, they will often give quotations from, Hitler or Goebbels or Churchill or whatever, and their source will be from someone's history text. They have about a dozen, really good definitive books that they use as their primary sources. Well, that would never fly if you were writing a paper for a history class, let alone journal. No, you better go find the actual quote if you're going to cite it as an authority that this historical figure said this. You're not using somebody else's work to cite that, right? How does this fly in this supposedly academic community that's allowed, that you don't cite the original source?
Uh, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that bothers me about this whole movement in academia is a lot of the things that are being used as textbooks. Textbooks should be peer reviewed,
Mm-hmm.
and none of the ones I've read, like "Are you being equal?" or "Are we all even equal?" or whatever, D'Angelo. None of the ones I've even read would have survived the mildest of peer review, because like I said, they misrepresented the sources they used. So she would say 1 in 3 such and such happens, and I would go to the actual source and it was 1 in 5. So it wasn't even a direct representation of the source they used. And that's not even throwing out the fact that the source was also misrepresenting data. So it's a woke publication based on woke sources misrepresenting data for their own
Doubly
agenda.
misrepresenting.
Yeah, and then they're even misrepresenting those because the number wasn't good enough. And a lot of things that are affecting our social interaction as people are based on this stuff. And one of my problems with the way we get data is the media is one thing, because we do have a freedom of press. So we're walking a tightrope with how do we make sure that they tell the truth, because you can't have the government make them or it becomes a government media, because then the government starts basically saying what you can and can't say. But something like the CDC or the DOJ, why can't we hold them to, well, you can't misrepresent data. You can't give me a model based on 3 assumptions about
Right.
the data. One I'll bring up here is stuff that brought on very big policy, Title IX, on uh, proper representation for the accused, is based on CDC breakdowns of rape. And if you take rape numbers back for the last 80 years, you get a number like 1 in 50, 1 in 80, something like that. Women are raped. And that was being generous. That's if you take the top number and you assumed everybody's alive. That was alive 80 years ago, which would make like 75% of the female population 80 or older. So we know it's not true. But it's still giving, when I make an assumption on a model, I give
Yeah.
it the furthest away from my agenda as possible, because I think that adds power if it still supports me. But the best, 2 studies come out on that, and they make assumptions based on whatever their assumption was. And one of them was like 1 in 45, because of, well, you have to make assumptions because how many aren't reported is the real thing. So you're making a guess on how many aren't reported versus what are reported. And so one was 1 in 45 and one was 1 in 5. That's a pretty big gap between the two. Guess which one the CDC posted?
I'm assuming it's the 1 in 5 one.
1 in
and
5 women are a victim of rape in their lifetime.
Mhm.
That's a lot. You almost have that in your own family,
Mhm.
in your own immediate family, because you got what, 2 sisters and a mother. That's 3. So you look down your street and you're like, wow, 10 people have been raped on my street. That's a lot. 1
Well,
in
and then
45 is still a lot.
Mhm.
1 in 80 is still a lot. 1 in 100 is still a lot. But so CDC reports it as 1 in 5. D'Angelo reports it in Are We Even Equal as 1 in 3.
How? Okay.
Well, 1 in 3 was victim of sexual assault
Okay.
in the CDC, which is also based on a lot of assumptions about underreporting. But if you take the numbers of what is actually reported based on population, it's 1 in, like, again, if you assume everybody's still alive from 80 years ago, it's 1 in 80 or something like that. So, which we know that's not true. So somewhere probably about 1 in 300 or somewhere around there. That's kind of a guess based on just quick math. But so you're assuming, so you have to make an assumption at some point. How many are underreported? Is it 5 times the number of that actually reported? Is it 10 times? Is it 100 times? What is that based on? And that's the question that's not answered, but we have policy being based on this. But I've been told I intimidate people with statistics.
Numbers are part of the colonial patriarchy.
Yeah. What is it? Dr. J said, don't you just love when these guys come in and try to intimidate people with their statistics? Like, statistics are just numbers.
1 + 1 equals I need some nachos because I haven't eaten today. So that's probably a good place to wrap it up.
It is a good place to wrap it up.
Go
Because
go look up the numbers yourself. Go move mentally, move physically. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about here is just exercise your body and your mind. Don't get sedentary in either.
Well, and since we've gone so long, we got to bring up from the earlier part. Don't assume the other side of your debate is the worst possible thing you would do in that situation. Because again, that's where the justification for bad behavior comes in. You say, if I was a bad person on that side, I would do this. And it's not, it usually is not representative of what the other side would doing. Anything we talk about, we're just talking about things that happen, are happening, and the patterns that go along with it. We're not really drawing any conclusions. We're just kind of stating what is and how it creates a pattern. All right, dude. I gotta get to bed. I didn't sleep enough while you were in town. So yeah, my deadlift suffered today. It was not a good session.
I couldn't deadlift today.
Oh yeah, your fall.
I got to fight with the rocks. All right.
All right, dude.
Go away, people.
Later.